Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reap the Spoils. I'm Bart Sullivan.
I'm Delilah Lugo.
And I'm Jason Kwasnicki.
I reined it in a little bit.
You did.
I had to do a little something for this episode, because this episode we're covering kind of a horror classic, but also a modern take on a horror classic. Really, more so the latter. Jason, what game are we talking about today?
We are talking about Resident Evil 4. Very
Remake.
reined in. Remake, yeah. But
Um,
are we just talking about the remake,
no,
or are we
like,
going to talk about
no.
Resident Evil 4? Yeah.
So okay. Reap the Spoils. We're a monthly spoiler cast. We pick a game, we play it, we come here, and we spoil it. We talk about everything from the story to the gameplay. If this is your first experience with the game we're talking about today, which is Resident Evil 4, if you have not played the game, is essentially what I'm asking or saying, please pause this episode. Go play that video game, and then come back and press play and listen to us talk about it. Obviously, I can't stop you from listening to us first and then playing it, but you do so at your own risk. And in this case, we're talking about the 2023, the brand new Resident Evil 4 remake, but by extension, we're also kind of talking about the 2005 original. So, and honestly, like, if you are playing Resident Evil 4, like the new Resident Evil 4 that just came out, and you haven't played the original, you're doing yourself a disservice. And like, we'll go into why. That's not to say that I didn't like this new remake. Spoilers, I really liked this new remake, but the original,
Spoilers for the spoilers.
yeah, spoilers for the spoilers. Jason and I will be the first to admit, like, Resident Evil 4 is in our top 5, 3.
Top 3.
It's in our top of games of all time. Like, we love original Resident Evil 4. I think Delilah likes it too. I'm not really sure where that
No, I
lies.
fucking love it.
There you go. Okay.
Which is
I
why
don't-
there's no reason you should not, it's easy cheap to get now on pretty much any platform. It's been released.
About that. We'll talk about that very shortly.
but the point is you should go play the original just because it's better than 95%, or it's better than 99% of games coming out in the last few years.
Yeah,
That's
even,
true.
Even today, it still stands tall, and we'll dig a little into that. But point is, this episode we're going to be talking primarily about the new Resident Evil 4, but by extension, we will be talking about the original a lot. So if you haven't played either, if you've only played one and not the other, I highly suggest you go play both, and then come back to us and listen to us talk and spoil those games. That all being said, are we ready for a brief history lesson on Resident Evil 4?
Yeah.
Enlighten us.
I would be happy to do so. And obviously, I say brief history lesson. I'm gonna try to fit in as much here as possible, at least like the key points. So Resident Evil 4 kind of started its history in 1999, following or around the release of Resident Evil 3. We talked about that game in our last episode. If you haven't listened to that, haven't played those games, go play them. Go listen to our Resident Evil 3 episode that came out last month. Resident Evil 4 started development and went through kind of a tumultuous, very very iterative gameplay development, or a game development cycle, in that it went through 4 iterations before they landed on the iteration that actually released. They went through 4 different versions of that game before the final version was starting development. And fun fact, the first iteration of Resident Evil 4 did release as a video game, just not a Resident Evil video game. It was Devil May Cry.
Yep.
The first Devil May Cry was originally intended to be Resident Evil 4, and Kamiya's action mindset was deemed not really fitting for a Resident Evil title, so it became its own Capcom franchise. But yeah, this game was officially announced around the time the second version was their current development plan, and that was announced alongside 4 other Capcom games that were called the Capcom 5. Do you guys know about the Capcom 5?
No.
I've heard the term and I remember the games. I was there. I'm an old man now.
So the Capcom 5, this is I love this story. This is so fucking fascinating to me. The Capcom 5 were 5 Capcom developed video games that were planned to be exclusive. They were announced and intended to be exclusive to the Nintendo GameCube as kind of Nintendo's promise to support third-party developers and get more games released on their platform.
And they would cut their heads off if it ever went anywhere else.
Yeah, Shinji Mikami famously said, I think it was Shinji Mikami,
Yeah, it
famously
was.
said that if Resident Evil 4 released on anything other than the GameCube, he would cut his own head off. And as we'll soon find out, he still has a head, but that game definitely came to other systems than the GameCube. But yeah, the Capcom 5 included Resident Evil 4, Killer 7, a game called Piano 3, Beautiful Joe, and another game that I'm pretty sure was the only one that never released. Yeah,
Mm.
Dead Phoenix is the only game that within the Capcom 5 that did not release, and the only game that stayed exclusive to the GameCube was Piano 3. Beautiful Joe, Resident Evil 4, and Killer 7 all released elsewhere. But anyway, so yeah, not only did Resident Evil 4 not stay on the GameCube, it's one of the most ported games in history. It released on the GameCube January 11th, 2005. It came to PlayStation 2 less than a year later in, I think, November. Yeah, or no, sorry, October in North America. So less than a year later, it comes to the PlayStation 2 with additional content not seen on the GameCube version.
Yep.
And then it came to PC in 2007, the Wii in 2007, which a lot of people would argue is one of the best, if not the best, ports of the game due to its very unique control system.
Hmm.
Thanks to the Wii. It came to iPhones. It came to whatever the fuck the Zebo is. It got an HD port on PlayStation 3 and 360. Android, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. You get the picture. It's one of the most re-released ported game. The people rag on Skyrim for re-releasing itself.
Remake got shit on Resident Evil 4, yeah.
Resident Evil 4 is so much worse, but I think it doesn't really get much shit about it because it's like damn near a perfect video game.
Yeah.
Whereas Skyrim, as much as people like it, there's lots of flaws that a lot of people point out in Skyrim that I guess make it more of a punching bag.
It's also an open world game.
Yeah, right. But anyway, that's the history of original Resident Evil 4, or the brief history. For the remake, development of this game started at the developer M2 in 2018. We talked about M2 a little bit in the Resident Evil 3 episode. It was moved in-house in 2021. So it's just kind of interesting because at that point in 2018, when development, and it was, in all likelihood, it was very much like pre-production for this game. We hadn't even gotten Resident Evil 2 remake yet. That didn't come out until 2019. So they've really been planning a lot for Resident Evil ever since 7, realistically. And that remake of 2 especially. These have kind of all been things on the cards for a while. And this remake released recently, March 24th, 2023, for modern consoles, PS4, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. I don't actually know if it's coming to Switch on a cloud version, but it probably will at some point because that's what Capcom has been doing.
Mm.
If it's cloud, it doesn't matter. I was going to say if it could run it, but...
Yeah. I mean, if your internet can run it.
True.
If your internet can handle it.
Yeah, I didn't, yeah.
But yeah, that's the brief history lesson on Resident Evil 4, both the original and the remake. Wanted to just fill in as much there that I found actually interesting as possible. So
Yeah.
final warning: if you have not played Resident Evil 4 or the recent remake, now's your time. Pause the episode, go play both of those games, and then come back and press play and listen to us spoil the whole thing. Are you guys ready to dig in to the story
I'm
of
more
these
than
games?
ready. I was
You're more
born
than ready.
ready.
Oh, Jason, why don't you kick us off? What do you want to say about the ending? And kind of, it doesn't change much, but it does. There are some things throughout the game that have kind of changed. Like, um, I guess the big thing that comes to mind for me is that we don't see Sadler in the flesh until the very close to the very end. What did you guys think about that? How he kind of just appears to Leon in visions and kind of fever dreams.
I think it was cool because it just shows more of like the power of this like hive mind parasite thingy versus like seeing him in the flesh. I don't know. I feel like there's less mystery of his power. So I think I liked it more that way, the way they did it in the remake.
I mean, the biggest thing that we miss out on by not having Sadler in the flesh until close to the end is that A, he's not the one that kills Luis, and B, we don't get to see that weird tentacle come out from under his dress to stab Luis. um
Which I think makes Luis go like I felt like the way he died in the original was like kind of cheesy for like a
oh,
one of the main supporting characters. It was like, "Oh, all right, this guy's done."
there is a lot I do want to say about Luis, but we'll get to that shortly. Jason, what are your thoughts on some of the connective threads between through this game and to the ending?
So overall, and I guess this will be a running theme. They obviously tried to rein in, and this was one of the main worries that you and I had in the years leading up to the inevitable release of this.
Yeah.
Was one of the hallmarks of the original is the cheese. It embraces the tone of it's an action movie. You got action hero, action villain. It embraces that tone, digs into it. And the changes here are meant to reel that in all across the board and bring it somewhat in line with this new like remake verse they got going on with RE2 remake, RE3 remake. Go watch our videos on those. We
Don't
do
say
mention
remake verse because there is a game called RE-verse that we don't want to talk
no.
about.
Anyway,
um,
the point I'm getting to at the end is that across the board, I think there are winners from this attempt with this particular game, and there are losers. Sadler, I understand why they made the changes they did, holding him off largely until the end. And I agree with what Delilah said is it's clever to use it as a way of the mind control aspect of showing that visually, and making that a more imminent threat. So it does like work. And making him a straight up cult leader, like a fanatic, which is not what he was in the original game.
oh,
In the
I
original
think
game, he was just America is so arrogant. And keep in mind that the time that we're talking about, this is shortly after the Iraq War, a lot of
Mhm.
protests. So, like, there's very much that energy going on in politics and pop culture around the world. So it's like, oh, you arrogant. He even says the first time you meet him in the original game in the church, like, you arrogant American cowboys think you can rule everything. You know,
Mhm.
he's very cheesy. I personally liked that better,
Yeah, I mean
but
that's fair.
I don't hate this. I prefer just a cheesy action villain to the cult leader,
Well,
but
I do kind of want to push back on that just a little bit because it's not like Sadler wasn't very much was a cult leader in the original. They just leaned much more into that as his defining trait in this
right.
remake. They toned back a lot on they were much more subtle about his end goal in this game, I felt. And at least when it came to him directly, I think it was
Yeah,
actually
he
Salazar that explicitly said what Sadler's end goal was, which it
well,
wasn't the case in the original
no,
game.
in the original game he states it the first time you meet him in the church. He says,
Right, right.
yeah. And as far as him being a cult leader in the original, he played it off more like he literally says like I am the fine leader of this religious community. Like he
Mhm.
almost as if it's like, you know, he's charading. Like he knows it's all bullshit. He's just using everybody. Um, But while I prefer the original, I understand why it's done the way it is here, and it works with what the rest of the game does. I just feel like it's a slight loss that we lose out on some of those lines that that Sadler gives in the original game. It's also worth noting that in this game you don't have the I forget what the comm system is called in the original.
Yeah, and that's like a big
It's
thing.
a very Metal Gear Solid type thing.
Yeah, and it's funny. I didn't really notice it until I saw some. There's several things that I didn't notice until they were pointed out to me, and I realized, oh wow, this isn't here, this isn't here, and that's one of them. I kind of didn't really put together, oh, that the enemies or the villains don't really talk to me directly via the comm system anymore.
Which happened a
Um,
lot in the original, and it allowed for a lot of
halfway through the
characterization. Yeah,
halfway through the game, you don't talk to Hunnigan anymore. You talk to
yeah.
Salazar and then Sadler.
And then
Um,
Ada starts using it like about halfway
well, in the
through.
original, Ada
Oh,
doesn't talk
oh,
to
oh, oh.
you through
I thought
that.
you were talking about the remake.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no. Yeah, sorry. I mean, still halfway through the game, Hunnigan stops contacting you in the remake as well. But she's not replaced by Salazar and Sadler. This time, she's replaced by Luis and Ada.
Ada.
Hmm.
um which I like. I really like what they did with incorporating both of those characters a little more and getting Leon more FaceTime with them, even if it's through a comm system. But we do kind of miss out on his dynamic with the villains, which was a very core integral part of the original, and those character dynamics, kind of why Salazar is so memorable, why Sadler was so memorable, because they just call and taunt Leon, and you got some of the best lines from that game just through those comms. Your right
Right
hand
hand
comes
comes
off.
off. Yep.
Like, there's so many memorable things that come from that are we just don't really get here. And not
Well,
to say
yeah,
that there's a lot of lines
yeah.
from this game that are memorable, but
In the original, they definitely aped that from Metal Gear because it works so well for Metal Gear for what Metal Gear is doing, and I think because they went in that more action movie direction, I think that's something they took from it, and it just
yeah.
happened to work here in the original. Um, I like the
Yeah,
way it's
I
implemented. Oh, sorry, Delilah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say I definitely missed the line where he was like, "Oh, another senior moment." I don't think he had that
Yes,
line in the remake. But
no,
at the same time, I do feel like all the changes that they had went with the tone that they were going for, and I like that playing the original feels like this like cheesy, campy, fun game, and this feels like it has that cheesy and campness with like Leon's dialogue only, and the rest of it is kind of leaning into this more serious tone. So I kind of like the differences because now I feel like I can play both games and still feel like they're both worth experiencing separately. You know? They're
and
not
and
like
I
just
do
copies of each other.
and I do want to reiterate something, because in our last episode about Resident Evil 3, we accidentally got on a big tangent about Resident Evil as a series. And
hmm
I said this there, and I'm when we announced we were going to be doing Resident Evil 4, and I'm going to say it again here. Um, and after playing it, especially, I still feel this holds true. Um, this game is not trying to, it does not accomplish, but it's also not trying to replace the original game, which is impossible anyway because of how accessible and easily obtainable the original game is. This game and all the other Resident Evil remakes are kind of existing in their own, like, parallel timeline, parallel universe, whatever, of Resident Evil, and they're coexisting alongside the originals, and they're not trying to replace them. The only one that I would say was really trying to replace its original iteration was the very first Resident Evil remake.
Yeah.
It's the only one I would say you could play this safely and never have to play the original release, because it takes everything that that game did and just does it better and makes it a much more bearable experience. But every other Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 remakes, they all don't replace their original iteration because they're different enough and they're doing different things. They have different tones. You're essentially playing two completely different video games, and they both stand really tall on their own merits, especially when it comes to Resident Evil 4. Um which is my long-winded rant and way to say, like, yeah, I totally agree with what you guys are saying. As far as comparing this to the original, and we missed some stuff, but we gained some stuff as well.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
totally.
Going back to the ending, kind of the ending stuff a little bit. Sadler's plan, obviously, we talked about it a little bit, was infect Ashley and return her infected to the U.S. to kind of infect everyone with the plaga and kind of rule a world under his own making. And with the plaga, I feel like we got a lot more fleshing out of how it functions and how, like, I believe there was a file in the original game that explained, like, it was encased underneath the
Yeah.
community or underneath the castle. I don't know if they explicitly mention Amber. I kind of forget.
No, it's in
It
a
might have
file.
just okay, was it encased in Amber in the original as well?
Yes, I believe
Okay.
it says it in the file, and I think there might have been a sellable collectible that you find, like a piece of amber,
No,
and
I
like
don't
you
think
can
there
see
was.
in the original.
I don't think there was amber, like, that you could sell in the original. It might have just been a fossil or something that,
Maybe.
that they reference the plaga being encased in. Point being, though, is they really expanded on the plaga being encased in amber, and there being, like, the holy body being, like, I guess the central plaga that kind of acts as the core hive mind for the parasite.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I think they did that very purposefully in terms of putting so much more focus on the
Yeah.
Plagas.
And not to mention kind of expanding on where Resident Evil's been progressing, going from viruses more to parasites in this iteration, or this part of the greater Resident Evil timeline. And eventually, obviously, we branch out into other things that function similarly in later games. I don't
Yeah,
want to elaborate too much more on that, but I
yeah.
I
I
do
mean,
I do
maybe
agree with you. I do think it was deliberate.
I'll just say it really quick here. Maybe if we want to expand on it later, we can if we have time. I think going forward, they're basically going to replace what was the mold in the newer games. They're just going to replace what Plagas or whatever the equivalent will be if they go certain routes. Remake 5. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think they'll replace it so much as they're trying with these remakes. They're trying to connect the dots some more, and
Mhm.
they expand on the plagas here. And where does this game take place? It takes place in Spain, or a remote island off the coast of Spain, close to Europe. With this game coming closer to where Village takes place and kind of having similar um infections, so to speak. I think they're trying to connect the dots a little more with these newer remakes.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, any more thoughts on the Plaga and the Amber, the Holy Body, Sadler?
Um, n-
Leon
no,
sure gave him a holy body, huh?
in terms of yeah,
So another portion of the ending, who helps you defeat Sadler, who helps you give him a holy body, is Ada. Let's talk about Ada, because she kind of has an interesting expansion in the ending here, to
yes,
this game. Um, I mean, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that little scene at the end where she very clearly talks to Wesker, for the first time in the RE engine, I think.
Yes.
hmm
Um, and there's a couple things to kind of point out about that scene when you first see him, sitting at his computer. You could see very clearly in one of the little screens Excella Gioni from Resident Evil 5.
right.
So they're definitely setting up for Resident Evil 5 to be, maybe if not the next game, one of the next games that they're going to be remaking. Um, but he's still as cartoonishly evil as he's ever been. There's gonna be billions of
Yeah,
of
Casualties.
casualties. What and throughout the whole game, there's been a lot of criticism about the actress that portrayed Ada in this game. But I saw a different take that I kind of really liked and kind of recontextualizes and makes her performance a little better in my mind. Not that I didn't like it, but it does make it a little better. Anytime she's talking to anyone regarding her mission, she comes off as really bored and kind of phoning it in. But anytime she's talking to Leon and kind of helping him out or whatever, she perks up a little bit. She sounds a little more interested anytime she's interacting with Leon. And that kind of plays a little bit into her morality change at the end. um she's not just in it for her mission or the money or whatever. She's not just an evil person doing evil things. It's just a job to her, and once she has a chance to actually do some good, she takes it. She helps Leon. She finds out Wesker just wants to kill a bunch of people and spread whatever he plans to do with the Plaga sample. And she says to the pilot, like, we're changing course. Let's go. Um, I kind of think that that's an interesting way to look at her character. What do you guys think?
I've heard this interpretation, and I got to be honest. I think it's cope. I think
Okay.
if you want to if you
Okay.
want to jump into the Ada voice acting, I guess it's a controversy. 'Cause some idiots decided to go after online.
Yeah.
Look, here's my take on it. I don't understand why they didn't just use the same person from 2. I
Well,
mean, I
what's
know why. I know why. It's because she played Ada in, I guess, a live action show.
the Welcome to Raccoon City movie?
Yeah, or movie. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um, the one who was in 2 was fine. Could have been perfect. I can't say why she comes off as so bad in this. Either it's direction, voice acting direction. Either because especially if like they're all voice acting isolated, they don't have people to come off on. I don't know if this actress had any experience with voice acting, which is very different from regular acting.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. It just wasn't good.
I mean,
and that's
personally, I didn't think it was bad. I definitely agree that the older performances, older iterations of Ada definitely sound better. Not denying that. I can't disagree with that. They sound better. But I don't I I do agree with you to an extent that it is kind of cope. But I think if you go into it, if you listen to it with that mindset, it does kind of contextualize it in a more positive light. It kind of does make it sound a little bit better. And I think that's just helpful to make it a more um I guess pleasing experience going into this game.
yeah.
It,
I get what you're saying. I just
yeah.
and you know I heard that, and when I was going through on my second run, it just comes off as monotone. Um, I prefer the 2 remake version much better. I obviously prefer the original much better.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then again, as I said, when it comes to there are winners and losers from the tone change they made from the original. In the original, she was basically a James Bond character. Here, it's vastly more subdued. But the voice acting just kind of comes off as monotone. As far as the actual material itself, like forget about the voice acting for a second. In terms of what that ending, which if I remember correctly, does that come right before or like in the middle of the credits? I remember there were like there's the end of the credits where you get rating, but there's also like a sequence and then another cutscene. It doesn't matter.
In the original?
No, in the remake.
In the yeah, there's like they do like that whole sequence where they're showing like the photographs of the progression of like the downfall of the village
Yeah, and then after
and
that comes Ada's final cutscene,
yeah,
right?
after
Yeah,
that comes Ada's cutscene, and then it's the full credits.
yeah. So
Um
I do like I do like that scene. Like, and in terms of the
Mhm.
content of the character, just generally, like if you just take away the voice acting and just read the dialogue, I like where they're going with the character.
Yeah.
It's really just the performance is the only thing I have the issue with. It's in terms of what they're actually doing with the writing. I do like, and I love that implication of, she changes course. She tells the pilot to fly in a different direction, which
Yeah.
implies that Ada won't stick it through to that same mission she's been so clinging to throughout the entire game, and
Yeah, and
Leon
like
has
I
kind of
said,
been prodding her.
her character's kind of been building toward that the entire game. There
Right.
was the whole conversation Leon had with her in the boat, like, have you changed, Ada? And she kind of doesn't answer that. She dodges the question. Um, but
Yeah, it's nice. They did a good job, and we'll get more into this with other characters.
yeah.
They gave everybody an arc, which is
Mhm.
nice.
Yeah. Delilah, did you have any thoughts on Ada's character, uh, particularly in the ending?
Yeah, I think now it's a little bit more clear that she has good guy intentions rather than her just doing the job because she turned
Mhm.
course on that secret ending.
Yeah.
And she's still like this like hot badass. Even if her voice actress wasn't as good as RE2 Remake's voice
Yep.
actress.
Delilah
I
agrees with the yes.
I mean, like I said, I don't disagree. It's just I think if you go in with what I theorize or what I said, what I had heard elsewhere and kind of helped me appreciate it a little more, like it makes it sound a little better. But I agree, it's probably the worst iteration of Ada we've ever gotten. I
like
definitely agree
I
with
don't
that.
think people should be like threatening the girl.
Oh
Like
well,
No,
she
no,
wasn't
no,
terrible,
no,
and
no
even
one should
still,
be
it's no
doing
reason to threaten anyone. But
and I
I do
want to
feel
make it
like
very clear. As I said in the beginning, I called the people who did that idiots.
Yeah,
That's
they
the
are
dumbest
idiots.
shit ever. If
Yeah,
anything, it's not the voice actress's fault. It's the director's fault and the people who greenlit it and said, "Okay, just we'll use that."
yeah, right.
And honestly, after seeing this secret ending, like I know like we're probably gonna get the DLC separate ways that we got in the original, probably remade. But I'm thinking that we might eventually, like in a future Resident Evil game, get like a Ada Wong like main protagonist game. I don't know why I'm feeling that way lately.
That would be cool. Well, I mean, technically, we kind of did get that with the fourth campaign of Resident Evil 6, but
Oh,
Well,
I
that's an avenue we'll go down one day.
yeah.
and we'll talk about it, but I said in the last episode we did on RE3 Remake, I wanted an Ashley Graham protagonist. And I don't know. They hinted at it, but we'll get there.
Hey, well, you know what? I mean, we could pivot and talk about Ashley right now if you guys want to. Because I think her character is pretty significantly changed from the original. What did you guys think of Ashley in this game and kind of how she's portrayed as a character?
I like that they didn't try to make her a badass like they did Princess Peach in the new Mario movie, where it was just kind of like not even the character.
Whoa, 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 whoa! This is not a Super Mario Brothers movie spoiler cast, Delilah.
I
No,
haven't seen it yet, and I want to try. So please,
like they still made her like this very girly, like sorority kind of like sheltered person, but she wasn't like helpless. Like Leon, where you going? Like you didn't have
yeah,
any of that annoying stuff coming from her. Not to say that she wasn't annoying. Like the mechanic of her is meant to be a pain in the ass, but
Yeah.
she was way less like needy and like she had cool moments. She had moments where I was actually happy to see her. Whereas in the other game, when you remet with her, I was like, I think I could have used the time without you. It's fine though. So I think some of the gameplay sequences they had with her were really good as well.
Yeah.
hmm
Um, I I I guess I could call myself an Ashley defender. Like
me too. I was going to say
I've
the same
never
thing. Yep.
like people always complained like in the wake of Resident Evil 4's original release, like always complained about the escort mission aspect and having to take care of Ashley. She never really got in the way. She was never that much of a hindrance in the original game. I never really understood the massive amount of hate that she got.
Yeah,
Um
and if we're being objective, and we'll get to this when we get to gameplay, Ashley is far more annoying gameplay wise in this remake than she was in the original. Because in the
Oh,
original,
yeah,
you could
yeah,
just have her hide for the entire fight.
and that was the next thing I was gonna say is that like while I like the portrayal of her character significantly more in this remake. I think she's great in this remake. She is much more confident, she's actually helpful. Story-wise, she like her and Leon have some better rapport. I love the change that they made in the middle of the castle where instead in the original she coughs up blood, Leon says, "Hey, are you okay?" and then she throws a tantrum and gets trapped.
Yeah,
um
the way that they separated made a lot more sense in this remake.
yeah, it's so good. Like she actually like she's actually legitimately terrified and has reason to be terrified. She got overtaken, she stabbed Leon. Like who and they actually get separated by like a physical barrier, not her again throwing a tantrum and then getting trapped. They just get naturally separated, and the reunion where she's really upset, like the character dynamic between the two of them, it's so good. It really is. I personally think just a noted improvement, especially in that whole sequence where the two of them get separated.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and there were some tech issues, by the way, before. So if I was quiet, that's why. But I did want to say about the ending, like I was looking for like the thirstiness of the ending that Ashley had towards Leon, and
Yeah,
that Leon then like had towards Hunnigan.
yeah.
Um, and then like I felt like in this game he felt more like he was a mentor to her than like her just being like thirsty over him. There were moments where she was looking at
yeah, they
him.
threw in. I was gonna say the jet ski in particular. Like, there's clear implication, but it's much more subtle in this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there are moments. There are other moments, like you said, throughout the game.
Yeah, and
Um,
I do want to dive a little more into that when we talk about Leon's character. Um, but there was another thing I wanted to bring up about Ash. Oh yeah, just to talk a little bit about gameplay real quick. But yeah, go back to your point, Jason. Yeah, gameplay wise, she is significantly more cumbersome in this game. Because the two modes that you can have her in are either to stay close to you or just stay a little far away from you but still walk around. Whereas in the original, it's either stay close to me or don't move. And that makes playing or that makes guiding her significantly better, significantly easier. Not to mention she had a health bar in the original. She doesn't have a health bar here. It's she gets downed, and then if she gets hit again, she's dead.
Not to mention, just about every combat arena in the original had a hiding place for her, so you didn't even really have to think about it.
Not all of them, but like
Just about, like most.
it's not even it's not but even that removed, like just the way she functions in this game is just so much more frustrating to deal with because she is just so much more prone to getting in the way when you can't just tell her, okay, stop moving, just stay there, don't move. I don't care if there's a dude with a mace right in front of your face, you are not to move from this spot. Instead, now you could just tell her, yeah, just stay a little bit away from me, and she winds up being in the middle of a crowd of a group of enemies of her own volition anyway. It's just so frustrating to deal with.
It's also, we'll get more into the gameplay
Yeah.
aspects of her, I guess, later. But in terms of story, I pretty much agree with what you guys said. Like I said with Ada, they gave or I guess the four main protagonist or good guys arcs, and including Ashley, who gets more of an arc here. I
Yeah.
agree with what you said, Mark. She has better chemistry. I like acting on her. The growth. I even somewhat enjoyed the gameplay section where you play as her.
Mm.
She was
Um,
Alan Wake.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I guess
Um,
she was.
I guess I will say that while I consider objectively her to be one of the winners in terms of who lost and who won in the whole tonal shift the game took,
Huh.
she's definitely one of the winners. At the same time, I still, and maybe it's just biased, I still have a soft spot for the original Ashley, the voice acting, and kind of the more childlike um, depiction of her. Because keep in mind, she's supposed to be what, like 19?
Well, I think I think in this game she actually is older right? Because I don't remember where she was how old she was supposed to be or where she was supposed to be in her life in the original. I don't know. I can't recall if she was in college, but she is in college in this game, and she feels like much more of a college student. Um, Also, can we talk about the Motorola Razr? This
Yeah.
game is just like they really did some really cool things to keep this game pretty grounded in its time period.
Yeah.
Yep.
And throwing in that Motorola Razr, damn,
Pink
makes you feel
one
nostalgic.
with some
Yeah, pink
stickers
one.
on it.
Yeah,
Yep.
and one of those was a sorority sticker. Like they really wanted to show they and hammer home that hey, she is a college student in this game.
Yeah. I think so. I understand the Ashley hate in the original because I played the original pretty recently, and it's because of the repetitive dialogue. That's not
Help
really
me,
a
Leon. Help me.
yeah. Like you're over here trying to find like items and stuff, and she's like repeating herself over and over in like this really whiny tone, and it kind of like gets like Navi kind of annoying, where it's like okay, you're saying the same thing over and over again. Whereas in this game, I had that problem actually with Leon and the merchant with repetitive dialogue, but their voices aren't as whiny.
There was one thing that Leon always said that I just always thought was stupid.
Not bad, huh?
Yeah, that's it. Not bad, huh?
Yeah,
Like, Leon, who are you bragging to?
yeah,
Like, the Ganados don't care about your sweet roundhouse kicks, man.
yeah,
Like,
But yeah,
um,
but overall, I agree with what you guys said about Ashley and Ark. And as we mentioned at the beginning, I do like that they did insert some of those thirsty little quips like, "Oh, Leon, you'd look good in armor. We make a good team." And then, of course, the jet ski. Hey, I could speak to my father, put you on my detail.
mhm.
Um, but I also, at the same time, one of you mentioned him, Leon, being like more of a mentor figure in some ways.
yeah,
And I did love that bit on the island section when you're going up the elevator, and she says like, "Hey, we could be like a team." And I got really excited because, as I mentioned earlier, in our Resident Evil 3 discussion, I said I want if the go moving forward with the series, give us Ashley Graham, a new rookie agent with Leon as a mentor, and I was like, oh my god, they listen to our episode, they
Hey,
know what
man,
I want.
they kind of did that with I mean, once again, talking about other Resident Evil games, but they kind of did that with Sherry, you know? Sherry was an innocent little girl in Resident Evil 2, and by Resident Evil 6, you're playing as Sherry as a trained agent. So,
Yep.
yeah.
um,
I would be
who
down
knows?
for that.
Maybe one day we will get the Ashley Graham game of Jason's dreams. Also, yeah, I do agree. I never thought about the mentor figure thing, but I do agree with that, and I do like that. It also like that gets hammered home a little bit when he like during that conversation where he's like, "Oh, we could be a team," and he mentions like, "Oh, your knife safety needs some improvement though."
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
little
but he
comment he
also
made.
said you're doing well on your own. Like he was
Yeah,
very uplifting about her, which I
yeah,
thought was really cool.
yeah.
It also works well with Leon's own arc here, where he is in turn dealing with a mentor. It is a nice like parallel.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, let's start digging into Leon a little bit, because I know Jason, you and I were again in the lead up to this game, we were a little concerned, especially after the one trailer dropped, and it was had Leon kind of talking in his monologue at the beginning of the game, and it sounded very much moodier than the original game did, where he's like, I'm still like he's still kind of haunted by Raccoon City. Is like maybe this time it can be different. And it's like it was just it elicited a much different, much more different tone than the original did. But I still think his portrayal as kind of a cocky special agent, it was overall still pretty well done.
Totally.
Yeah, it's just more subtle. It's not. So for those who for some reason haven't played the original game, when the original game came out, Leon in this game, he just starts off as Mark said, hockey special forces agent, and coming from
Are we gonna sit
RE2,
around the campfire singing
yeah,
"Kumbaya"?
exactly. They went full action movie, and it worked because they kept a consistent tone and they embraced it and knew what they were. Um, Although if you were coming off Resident Evil 2, which is the last time you saw Leon, where he was that rookie cop, it kind of didn't really make sense, but it didn't need to make sense because they just embraced the tone of the game, which didn't require it to make sense.
Yeah.
Here, they definitely added a lot of context and connective tissue that that, to be fair, was there in other extended Resident Evil media. Like a lot of the stuff that they quote unquote added here to Resident Evil 4 Remake, um, it could be found on the internets or in other games or media, like the stuff with Krauser, the training. Um, but
Well,
in the original game, it's just you start off and he's just now a trained special forces guy.
yeah. The thing with Krauser, um, that wasn't really a thing at the time the original came out.
No,
So
I mean further down the line in other games, like
yeah,
it was like a time crisis like shooter. I think yeah,
Dark Side Chronicles, yeah. Which,
yeah,
but like at the time of that game released, and like this is still talking about Leon, but expanding to a bit the Krauser. At the time of the original release, Krauser was just like a new character that, and I
right.
feel like his introduction and Leon's surprise at him being there kind of fell flat for me. And I thought I was missing something at the time because Resident Evil 4, like that was my first Resident Evil game.
Mhm.
Um, and I was like, "Ooh, who's this Krauser guy?" And once I started looking, I couldn't find anything on him, and that's because it hadn't really been written yet. Dark Side Chronicles, which came out later for the Wii, you're right, it was a light gun shooter. That's what digs into Operation Javier and kind of expands and explains who Krauser is and what his connection to Leon is. Um, but like in the original game, I you're not really you're presented Krauser completely devoid of context, and the game doesn't really make enough effort to give you that context. You're just kind of supposed to take it for granted that okay, in the jump between 2 and 4, he knew this guy and things went sour, and that's kind of all you're really given. Um, I will say with Krauser, I think they did an excellent job integrating him into this new version by introducing him early and kind of building that rivalry between the two of them.
Yeah.
Kind of making him more involved in the story because he doesn't show up until the island
Mhm.
in the original, and here you actually do the knife fight with him in the mines when you're still in the castle. I think that was great.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and don't want to. We'll get, I guess, more into depth into Krauser, but to um pull back a little to Leon, I liked that they did that specifically because it gives Leon more. It builds his arc more vis-a-vis the villain. Like going back a little bit to Sadler, the way I said we miss out on a lot of the things that he did in the original. A lot of that, and especially the motivation, just that it's just a pursuit of power, kind of gets shifted on the Krauser. So whereas he didn't, Leon didn't really have a relationship with Sadler. He was just enemy of the weak.
Yeah.
Krauser kind of takes on a lot of that. You interact with him more as Leon, and he also plays off of the hero in terms of having a history with them and building into their arc. Which I guess for Leon, he does have much more of an arc here than he did in the original, and they bring all of the RE2 stuff into it. Whereas, you know, he is he is more of the traumatized warrior trope, if you will. Like he failed once, he won't fail again, and it kind of builds into why he's this determined, brave, uh, special forces man. Not just because he was trained, but also that experience that we just went through a couple years ago in Resident Evil 2 remake.
Yeah. But what I think is so well done about it is like that's they don't make that his whole character, right? He's
Right.
still like he's not as cocky as he was in the original. Obviously, they completely cut any semblance of him flirting with Hunnigan. Which I to an extent, I mean, this not this alone does this, but the way this game portrays Hunnigan, I feel like does the character a big disservice. She's really just all business and not really involved with the plot at all,
Yeah, in the
which
original,
I
she
think
was
is a
kind of
shame.
like, I don't know if you guys get this right. This is James Bond reference, but in the original, she was kind of like the money penny.
Hmm.
Um, and yes, you had a lot more dialogue with her. Again, they have that comm system kind of built into the UI, sort of. and it does
Yeah.
pop in, and that's primarily how you communicate with her. I did like the Eagle One to Condor. No, Eagle One is the president's daughter. It's the Roost to Condor or whatever.
Yeah.
Baby Eagle.
Baby Eagle.
Condor 1 was Leon.
Yeah,
Roost was Hunnigan. Baby
Mm.
Eagle was
yeah.
Ashley. And like,
Mhm.
yeah, I like that whole thing. It really grounds us in the idea that you are a U.S. government special agent. I like that aspect. I just feel that we lost a lot in giving Hunnigan and by extension Leon some personality by making all of their conversations extremely business
You
and
know, I agree.
absolutely no like rapport amongst them because they like even though Leon does a little bit of flirting with Hunnigan in the original and like whatever you could take that as gross if you want to, it was fairly innocent flirting in my
Like
opinion.
like I said, she was the money. If Leon was James Bond in the original, she was
Mhm.
Moneypenny.
Yeah. Yeah, I just feel that we lose a little bit of Leon's personality and by losing that and we lose all of Hunnigan's all of Hunnigan's like character is just kind of missing by just cutting her significantly out of the game. You know, we don't spend a lot of time talking to her when we are talking to her, and then we lose contact with her about halfway through. Still
Yeah.
calls in Mike for you though.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't get rid of that moment.
Yeah, that was really good.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say that honestly remake RE for Leon is probably my favorite Resident Evil character, period. Um because of how they fleshed out his relationship with Krauser and
Mhm.
Ashley and even Ada, but and Luis to an extent, but you're right, it did severely butcher, which was pretty cool
Yeah.
in the original. So, but I just think he had some amazing one-liners still, and I'm glad that they
Oh
didn't
yeah.
get rid of that. Like when Ashley was like taken by one of the Ganados, he would be like, "Hang in there."
like
Yeah,
I don't
I I,
like
I
I
would.
don't want
Oh,
to
sorry.
I don't want to misrepresent my opinion. Like I do think Leon is still Leon. Like I still think he's got his cocky attitude. The one-liners do wonders for him in this game and like he still feels like Leon. He still acts like Leon. I just feel it was definitely toned down a little bit. The confidence that he has in the original is a little toned down in this iteration of him,
Yeah,
which is fine, but
it's
I
toned down, but he's still a winner overall
yeah,
because they definitely flesh out the actual character more,
yeah.
and it plays into that. I think the one criticism I would have about Leon in this game is how many of the one-liners are relegated during gameplay and are very easily missed, or if you try to pay attention to them, you might miss some. Like particularly, I remember in the Salazar fight, he spews a bunch of one-liners, but like if you're actually trying to pay attention to the fight, you kind of miss what he's saying.
Yeah.
Um, but there were some good ones in just the basic combat as you're traversing, like with dog, keep your dogs on a leash. Like I liked that
Oh,
one.
I was gonna say nighty night.
99 Nights.
Nights.
Yep. There were still some good ones that were well placed so that you could easily hear it and not be distracted by paying attention to the game.
Yeah. Um, let's talk a bit about Krauser now, since we've already talked about him quite a bit. So like we get the introduction to him, which I think is brilliant, bringing it further or earlier in the game, having him be the one to kill Luis instead. And don't worry, we're gonna talk about Luis. But he's probably the character that's had the most significant and worthwhile changes, in my opinion. But Krauser's the one to kill Luis. Kind of gives Leon more of a. First of all, it introduces Krauser as a villain earlier, which I think was sorely needed. Gives them more of a rivalry, and kind of when you get to the camp just before his boss fight on the island, it's chilling. Like there's
Hmm.
the notes that you can read about Operation Javier. You really get a feeling of just how much of a grudge this man has been holding on to for 2 years. And
Yeah,
you see the photo of Leon that he just has. He just has a photo of Leon that says "I'm waiting" in red on it. Ooh, it's weird. It's creepy. and it really gives you it turns him much more into just like not just like a really angry dude from Leon's past. Like he's kind of had a psychotic break almost. They
For sure.
really did a lot for his character in this.
And
And
not just, oh, sorry, go ahead, Delilah.
no, I was just gonna say this entire section from a gameplay perspective as well was fantastic, but just it also speaks to the environmental storytelling with when you're in that tent and you're reading all the notes right before you encounter Krauser in that knife fight, just like all the shit he's doing and kind of like his obsession over the revenge that he wants against Leon or like getting the one up on Leon and that environmental storytelling was kind of sprinkled throughout the game in different ways, and we'll talk about them. But I feel like for the Krauser section, they didn't just talk about Krauser; they also talked about a baker that was
I
on.
was gonna bring that up. Yep. So we find out Krauser's the one that kidnapped Ashley, but he had help.
Mhm.
And in the one document there's some names listed of the people that assisted in the operation to kidnap Ashley, and one of them has a last name of Baker.
Yep.
Um could that be a connection to Seven in some way, to the Baker family?
It
And if
has to be.
so, like I read something just kind of diving into that theory and talking about how, well, we know, and not, we don't want to talk about this for too long because I don't want to spoil too much of Resident Evil 7, but we did do an episode on Resident Evil 7. Go listen to that. Um the two brothers, Jack and Joe Baker, they were former US Marines, I think. And Joe lives in isolation. We find out in the end of Zoe DLC for 7, Joe has kind of sequestered himself and lives in isolation. Uh I saw a theory like maybe he is the one who helped kidnap Ashley. He's ashamed of it. He got into a big falling out with Jack, and that was the reason why. Like, it's possible.
Yeah.
Um and obviously this is just a theory, and obviously it
A
could
game
just be
theory.
God. And it could just be a coincidence that there was someone named Baker in that document. Um, but I think it's interesting to point out. I'm happy you noticed it too, Delilah, because when I read that note and I saw Baker, I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to talk about this on the show. I
Yeah,
can't wait to bring this up. Holy shit. Um, there was another thing I wanted to bring up about Krauser. I mean, I like how much they dug into how they altered his boss fight to be less like, oh, you need the 3 MacGuffin keys in order to get past this door. Like, Krauser's like, all right, rookie, I'm putting you through some training, and it's like not really training. It's like this is live or die. Like, I'm going to test you to your limits, and then we're going to have a final fight, and only one of us is going to come out of this alive. Um, it's just once again it leans into Krauser kind of having this psychotic break of wanting revenge on the U.S. government, and the kind of this weird, it's very much implied, this obsession he's had with Leon. Just that photo alone says a lot about what he thinks of Leon, and this weird obsession he has with them.
Well,
uh
it's from a writing perspective, I found it, and I agree with everything you guys have said about how good of a job they did in fleshing out Krauser's actual character.
yeah.
They brought in all the connective tissue from the different Resident Evil media, very good. So he's definitely one of the winners in terms of the tonal change. He takes a lot of that, anti-government motivation that Sadler had in the original. Like I said before, he presents a good antagonist earlier on for Leon that Sadler kind of was in the original.
Hmm.
But I think most important to this is he plays a great foil for Leon's own arc, whereas
Yeah.
Leon's trauma causes him to seek what he sees as some sort of redemption for his failure in Raccoon City, whereas Krauser's trauma completely breaks him into unrestrained cynicism. He says, "I realize all that matters is power."
Yeah.
So his mentor has become the polar opposite of him, and the thing that cynicism that is kind of personifying Leon's own remorse about Raccoon City. So very good story device. Works perfectly for helping to give Leon more deeper motivation than he had in the original. Um, as opposed to the original, it's just save the girl. And here, yes, he has a mission. He wants to save the girl, but it's more than that. He's trying to redeem himself for what he perceives as his own self failings in earlier stories. So it all melts together. It all works well, and that theme of redemption is something we see across. Well, aside from Ashley, pretty much all the main characters.
And especially Luis.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Luis, because I think this is the character that I think they improved upon probably the most. In the original, he just doesn't. He's not really involved much. Um, and he kind of dies before he can really reach any semblance of potential. And this game just does wonders for his character and his arc, because we learn that Luis was a scientist, obviously, and was pretty familiar with the plaga. That's why he knows so much about it in the original. I'm talking about here, like, we explicitly find out, like, he used to work for Umbrella, and the thing that he wants to make up for is the fact that he helped this cult and worked for them.
Well, he
And
was also on the Nemesis program. That's the photo you find in the island. Or not in the island, in his lab.
oh,
So if
what?
you see that photo of him with all the other Umbrella
Yeah,
scientists, that's
yeah.
I I think it's one of the same ones you see in the original. One of the same like shots of
Mm.
the scientists with the Nemesis program. I bel
Oh, okay.
I might be wrong. That's what I thought initially, and I heard
Well,
somebody else, other
an
people online
interesting
saying the same thing.
way to connect it, and kind of to connect him to Umbrella further. Um, No, I like that a lot. I mean, yeah, well, right now, take it as pure speculation, but I think that's a really interesting that's a really interesting idea for his character.
Hmm.
But with or without that, like, you kind of piece put the pieces together, that he actually grew up in that village, and, like, lived there, knew the people, and he kind of had a part in ruining it, and he is on his own redemption arc to kind of stop it. That's why he takes to helping Leon. And he says the same thing here that he did in the original. Like, let's just say it makes me feel better. Um, and I think another stroke of brilliance was keeping him alive longer and actually pairing him with Leon for an entire chapter,
Yeah.
giving them more of a dynamic to bounce off of one another, to actually build some sort of bond between them, because they make Leon much more um, hesitant to trust Luis, very much questioning where his loyalties lie, and who he is, especially when he finds out he worked for Umbrella. So I really liked what they did with his character. I think it really did wonders for the story. Then they toward the end, they make Luis out to be this very noble hero, and I think that's great, because in the original, he dies, Leon just goes, Luis, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Leon, I've got it. And then a giant tentacle goes through him. And Leon's just
Yeah.
like, no! And he's shooting at
I
Sadler.
also I
I fucking
also
love that game, man.
I also appreciate that Leon actually pronounces his name correctly in this game.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
It's not, he calls him Luis every single time, not Lewis.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I enjoyed that too, and I'm not sure if I'm off base on a lot of the notes being about Luis. I just messed up his name after praising Leon for saying it right. Because like there was like a bunch of pictures of like him as a kid with his
yeah.
dad, and then there was like this section, I think in the manor or something, or maybe it was like an
So
underground
so
village
you
house.
find like journals and notes talking about like the grandson. If you go back to where Luis was and in that like chemistry area, but it is confirmed for sure that they are talking about Luis. If you backtrack to the Chief's Manor and you use
Exactly.
Ashley to get up into the attic, yeah,
Yep.
they because people were saying I think they're talking about Luis, and then somebody,
Yeah, because it said
yeah,
Navarro as the last name.
Yeah, that's only like explicitly confirmed if you go back to the attic in the Chief's Manor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was like revered as like like a really smart kid in the village, and like the dad like was really trying to protect him, and as the dad was like descending and becoming a ganado, he was like hoping that Luis got away and survived and things like that. And I just thought like they really did his character justice overall, not
Yeah.
only in like the dialogue explicitly, but also in the environmental storytelling and the notes.
100%. Like, if anything, it's almost a shame that a lot of Luis's backstory is told through notes because those will largely go overlooked by a lot of
Yeah.
people, but it really helps contextualize his redemption arc, why he's so insistent on helping Leon and Ashley escape and helping them remove the plaga from themselves, because he desperately wants redemption. He has deep-seated regret about what he's done, and you only really get the full effect of that if you pick up on it from the notes and everything.
Yeah, Luis is, again, back to the theme of winners and losers. Luis, I think, is probably the biggest winner
Yeah.
of all of the characters in terms of the changes.
I'm really glad you guys agree on that, because man, it blew me away. The changes they made with Luis really 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 pleased me. I was very happy about it. Couple other, I guess, core characters that we could talk about. We haven't really, I feel like there's not really much to talk about with Vitoris Mendez. Um if
Yeah.
anything, he's a little less menacing in this game than he was in the original. He just looks significantly less angry, and
You
maybe
know what
that's
it
I feel
is?
like he talks more in this one. That's part of it.
a little.
A
What
little
what what
more.
what, what is it, Delilah?
They designed his animation exactly like Mr. X and Nemesis.
I
Like
wouldn't be surprised if it's
they
just a
have like the same
recoding of it.
movement, the
Yeah.
same like body structure.
Yeah,
That's why I was just like, all right, I've dealt with this before.
He
it's
has the
there.
same hat too, doesn't he?
No, no. His hat is more of a full like round brim, whereas Mr. X I think wore a fedora.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, both RE engine. It's very possible they just reskinned the model. Up until his boss fight. His boss fight is very clearly
Oh
different.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like, yeah, he does talk more. He and his face just comes off a little less menacing, I feel. Um, but yeah, he was still, the boss fight was pretty cool. They didn't change that all too much. They shrunk
Hmm.
the arena, I feel, a little bit, but that's kind of all I have to say about that.
And
But they,
the second part of the fight, they added a mechanic where he like goes far away from you and he like throws barrels. I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
think that was in the original.
No, it
No.
wasn't. It wasn't. But we'll I do want to double back on like boss fight mechanics and stuff later, because I do have something big that I want to hit you guys with,
Cool.
and I want you guys to be prepared. Um, let's talk about a villain that did change in a lot of core ways that we have not talked about. Was Ramon Salazar. What did you guys think of the changes to that little baby boy?
I feel like they tried to make him more scary and menacing and it just didn't work. I feel like he was better off
Yeah.
being the like silly joke of a
Yeah.
character.
He just like,
Uh,
instead of making him look like a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a child that kind of doesn't progress
he's a
past,
brat. Yeah, he was a brat.
well, an adult that doesn't progress, that doesn't age past being a child or looking like a
Yeah.
Oh,
child.
a full grown
I
adolescent
I
is
get,
too modest.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to find the actual word, but here they make him look like he actually is portrayed as like a very old man that's just got stunted growth, whereas in the original he very much was an adult child. Like he was an adult by all intents and purposes, but he behaved like a brat. Here he's just a very very small, very old man,
Yeah.
and doesn't have, it's really not as fun.
No.
um
He is one of, if not the biggest loser. We just went from the biggest winner to the biggest
yeah,
loser
really, how
from
fitting.
from these changes. And going back to that comm system in the original, I think a lot comes from that, because without that comm system, all you really get, you interact with him, what, 2 or 3 times in person,
You don't interact with
and
them nearly as much, yeah.
and then there's just those horn things where the like that are placed throughout the castle that he can talk through. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
and he kind of just taunts you a little, but you don't get that back and forth that you got in the original that really
They
characterized him.
they almost took that straight out of Code Veronica, because that's a Code Veronica thing where there's like some loudspeakers
Yeah,
throughout the facility. Oh God forbid if they ever remake Code Veronica, guys. We'll talk about that later, but Jesus Christ. Yeah, I agree. Salazar, like, it's not like they needed. I feel like they over course corrected with him in terms of trying to make his character match with this new darker, more grounded tone that they're going for with these remakes. Like, you could have still had him just be silly, but like make him just more maniacal. So it's just like, wow, this dude is legitimately fucking nuts.
right.
Whereas instead here, he's just, yeah, he's just an old man that's like got this really extravagant castle that you know that he's trying to kill you in. Um, he loses a lot in this game, and it is disappointing. I gotta say, it is disappointing.
I feel like if they would have leaned into like the man-child element a bit more, it would have made him more menacing, because there's something about being an adult while looking a child that does something to the psyche that I feel like they could have leaned into.
Yeah,
But now he just seems like a rich asshole. Like he was an asshole before Las Plagas. Like he was like the shit that he was doing in the dungeon happened before shit went down, right? Um like with the Wolverine enemies.
yeah.
There was like a note about how like he would keep this family like continuously just killing and killing and killing.
And
Yeah,
that is something that I do like a lot, is that they build not on Ramon but the Salazar family, and
Yeah.
kind of show like this was once a noble family, and they the reason the plaga was encased in amber below the castle was they put it there, they trapped it, they made sure it was kept away from humanity, and they were kind of the guardians of making sure that it stayed that way. And Ramon is the one that kind of ruined it all, because he was just like sadistic, and when he found out about it, like he kind of took over. I can't remember if it's implied that he killed his father. I'm not 100% sure about that. But when he took over the family, like he was like, yeah, absolutely, let's take this plug out. Let's see what kind of damage this bad boy can do. And he wound up getting used for it by Sadler. He was manipulated and used by Sadler to unleash the plaga on everyone. But it was somewhat of his own volition. It was somewhat of his own fault,
right.
because he was portrayed as such a sadist. It's just I agree with you, Delilah. Like, you can still make him very silly and have it fit. It's just you lean into it even further, and it stops being funny and
Yeah.
starts being scary. But they didn't do that. They course corrected the opposite direction, and too much, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's really the biggest disappointment, I would say, for this entire game.
His boss, I mean, we'll get into boss mechanics, but his boss fight was probably the hardest.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that soon enough. Um, the last character, this is kind of just a throwaway. The last character I want to bring up before we start talking about some more broader things, the merchant. um, I'm still not crazy about his new voice and how he's a little more pirate like.
Yeah.
I do like that the shooting galleries lean into that a little bit. I think that's kind of neat, theming the shooting galleries around pirates. But what do you guys think of the new merchant?
Um.
I love the guy. You know,
Oh,
he has some cool
Yeah.
lines. Guns rhymes with fun, stranger.
yeah,
Like,
he
you
does
know,
have some good new lines. I gotta say, like the gun rhymes with fun one was got me good the first time I heard it.
Yeah, except you hear it like 1,500 times
Yeah,
every time you see him.
they
Yeah,
maybe could have
I think
come
I
up with
agree with
some.
that. That they may have just had him talk too much to the point, so that, like Delilah said, he starts repeating lines a bit too much. I
Yeah,
don't remember him talking that as much in the original,
no,
He
because
did.
which added to that mystique.
he only talked when you would interact with him. Here, you walk into a room and he's like, "Oh, break time's over, I guess."
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's a bit more of a comedic relief here, as opposed in the original. It's kind of like he's just this mysterious wanderer. There's almost an ominous feel to him,
yeah,
but not like in a dangerous way. It's just, you don't know what this dude's up to.
yeah, yeah, and we really don't get. I feel like this game had a good opportunity to kind of dive into a little bit of why he's there in the first place, and they don't do that like at all.
To be honest, I'm glad they didn't.
I
Uh,
mean, don't get me wrong. I don't want the question of who he is explained, but they
yeah,
could have done something to kind of tie him into the greater narrative. At the very least, they could have thrown in a mention of the Duke from Village. We know that they know each other. The Duke makes mention of the merchant. Could have returned the favor. Could have thrown out a reference to the Duke, but he didn't. So
Would've been cool.
yeah, it is what it is.
But I like, aesthetically he looked cool. I like the purple flame. Every
Yeah.
time, you felt safe seeing that purple flame. It looked extra nice.
Always, always.
And he always made sure to tell me how bad I stunk, and makes sense. I feel
Yeah.
like Leon does stink. So yeah.
um, but okay. Is there anything else about the story that we didn't talk about that we want to bring up? Any character things? Any story things?
There was
man.
just like some funny things with Ashley that I wanted to bring up that I meant to bring up before.
Oh, go ahead.
Um I love how she goes like, "Leave it to me. Like I'm good at this stuff, right?" And it's just her like turning a wheel.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at this stuff, you know. Yeah, it's turning a wheel.
I was like, "Yeah, Ashley, sure."
You're doing great, sweetie.
Yeah.
Just keep turning that crank.
Yeah. And then like it was cool that she was like, using the wrecking ball to help me fight enemies, but then she just put the wrecking ball right into Leon, and I was like, "Really?
Yeah.
Like you're just
Yeah.
gonna knock me over with everyone?" I guess that was my fault, but yeah.
That's like some ludo narrative dissonance isn't what I want to say, but it's the only phrase I can think of to describe it.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, yeah, I guess that was it.
Okay.
I guess I just I wish they had some form of the laser hallway, but I know it would not have
Yeah.
fit at all.
Hey, but at least we still got the throne. I'm
True.
happy that we still got that.
Yeah.
And it made a little more sense here, right? Like in the original it was just Sadler's throne deep underneath the island. Is like, this is kind of weird and out of place, but I guess it's there. Here it's Salazar's throne. It makes a lot more sense placing it in the castle.
Hmm.
I got a great screenshot because there's chickens in that area. So I sat in the chair and it does the whole thing where Leon like puts his leg up and he's like,
The chickens. Yeah.
and there was a chicken in the shot, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. It looks just so bizarre. This special agent just sitting on a throne, and there's a chicken there in the throne room. It was beautiful. What can I say? I'm gonna get it framed.
I think
Um,
there is a character that we didn't talk about that I think is important to mention, which is
what?
the dog.
Oh
Oh, I
yeah.
almost forgot
Well,
about that.
they really pulled the rug out from under us. They made
True.
us think that the dog wasn't in the game, and the dog is still in the game, just in a
Yeah.
completely different location, and you still rescue him. And that intro cutscene when you're fighting El Gigante, fucking epic.
Yeah,
It's like
they
lightning in the background.
Yeah, that's like the kind of thing you'd fucking get on a t-shirt in like the mid 2000s at like, I don't know, Spencer's Gifts or something.
Yeah.
yeah, they did a good job with playing with expectations like that. In some areas subverting them, in others like keeping you shifting. So like something the same. So like shooting the lake still causes
Yeah.
Del Lago to come out, but like up until that point, so much changed that some people thought it didn't. So they shot the lake, and then insta kill by Del Lago. But
Mhm.
no, they did a good job with that shuffling things around like that. And to Delilah's point with the dog, um, it yeah, I was super bummed in the beginning when he wasn't there, and then super happy when I saw him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was a good move on their part.
And even expounding on that a little, because like one of the next things I wanted to talk about is the locations that you go to, the three core ones, and kind of how they've changed since the original. I think a lot of the changes make a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Like going into the house in Pueblo and on the way to the church, um, it made a lot of sense just making that like a little cathedral, and then you go through and to an outdoor location to take the path to the church, versus going into a small house and then going into a cave and climbing out to go to the church. Like, did it really make sense that everyone in the village would do that every day to reach the church in the original? No.
Yeah.
I didn't really care, but this was kind of an intelligent change to make the Jason, you taught me this word, the verisimilitude of this village make a little more sense.
Yeah,
um
pretty much everywhere, every area, but this applies especially to the village area. Every arena feels like it has a actual purpose within the world. Like if you're climbing along ledges, looking down into a crevice, like, oh, that's a quarry. They've been digging here, stuff like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, good
um
job with that.
For sure.
and there were some other just shuffling of locations, like especially in the village, they didn't really remove anything. I think they just moved everything around.
Yeah,
So pretty much like 99% of the village was intact. And going back to the subverting expectations thing, going back to the Pueblo the first time and the tower crumbles and falls totally took me by surprise. And that was also getting introduced to the whatever the dog enemies are called.
yeah,
Getting introduced to them way earlier, which kind of takes away from their later introduction, with like the original introduction.
Mm.
um they even tried to make that kind of more, or tried to make it dramatic, and all the only new thing that happened was the plaga came out of its back,
Yeah.
right.
versus with the first time encounter. But like they it's like, to anyone playing Resident Evil 4 for the first time, like, this stuff is meaningless. It's just like, wow, this game's pretty good, whatever. To people that have played it over a dozen times, like Jason and I have, that shit was like, whoa, what are you guys doing right now? This is completely different.
Right.
Um
Or like
and
seeing the lift next to the chief's house, or was it the chief's house? I think it's the chief's house. No, it's a house that you see the lift next to in the original game. There was a lift section where you're going down and shooting guys on other lifts,
yeah,
but that's
yeah.
just completely removed here. But at least they included it, which so it's there. It's a nod, even though it's kind of disappointing that that section was taken
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, the end. I will say, like I say, 99% of the village was kept mostly intact. Like the last part of the village section kind of feels a little rushed and does deviate considerably. I kind of liked the idea that Mendez's eyeball was a key, and
Hmm.
here it's just a treasure, and you just walk up to the castle, no problem. That's an aspect I think is kind of lost, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter all that much. um, oh, and the trucks. There's no trucks that drive directly
Yeah,
at you that you have to
Oh
shoot
yeah.
the driver to stop it. Um, not that I missed that. It's just something that is gone.
Yeah. There was one more example of subverting expectations that I enjoyed, which was, I think, towards the island section of the game, where there was like a dumpster that looked just like the dumpster that you would hide Ashley in. Except when you open it, it's just another treasure in there. But I was
Mhm.
just like, oh, are they gonna have us hide Ashley in here, like, finally, after not hiding her in anywhere
What?
except a locker or two?
Yeah, I was gonna bring up the lockers.
yeah,
Um, yeah. So really liked the village. Like the castle, I think was also there were a lot of logical changes there, a lot more deviations. The biggest thing that's like completely new is actually like going out on the ramparts of the castle and that big
Right.
like armored gigante flinging stuff at you.
Right.
Um, and that whole area was kind of a puzzle in and of itself with the sun and moon switches and doors closing and opening depending on how you had
Even
the switches.
They definitely added a lot more puzzles.
Yeah.
yeah, even when you get to the castle in the original, you could just like shoot the barrels and be done with all of the tourniquets or whatever they're called.
Catapults.
Yeah.
Catapults, yeah. And
Tourniquets.
I don't know why I said tourniquets. I think I was gonna say
Trebuchet was like,
trebuchet. Yeah, that's
yeah.
what I was gonna say, and I said tourniquet instead because I'm stupid. But no, yeah, in the original, you could just like shoot the barrels from any angle, and this one you actually had to progress through the
Yeah.
level to get a different angle to shoot the barrels, which I thought made it more difficult, but it more cool.
Yeah,
I enjoyed that.
it did add a good challenge, and it was really hard to. I feel like dodging the fireballs that they threw at you. Like
It
I don't know, it
was
wasn't really working out for me. I got hit quite a few times.
same.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's that. There are some pretty big omissions. But ones that I think kind of make sense, like the fucking absurd lava room is gone. And that includes the little platform on giant wheels that takes you to it. Totally missing from this game, and like I'm not gonna say I miss it, but
Missed it.
it was that level of absurd that I
Yeah.
feel like we're kind of missing
It's
from this
like
game in a lot
it's
of
like the
ways.
way you no longer have Salazar's statue chase you, but at the
It
same
is
time,
there though.
it is there. Yeah, they
Yeah.
include it in a little arena where it like the head bobbles about and there's a giant
It's
flamethrower.
it's in they kind of repurpose it in the clock tower as a fire breathing Salazar, which is neat. Like at least they kept that the soul of it a little bit,
Yeah,
but
they kept the water room, but just changed it a little bit.
oh, the water room, like, yeah, they did change it slightly in terms of how you progress it, but like it was mostly kept intact, and I was really, I mean, that room sucks. It's difficult as hell on a first run if you don't know what
Right.
you're doing, but like, it was cool seeing it there, because it is bordering on like the completely absurd, like the lava room and stuff.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, the castle saw a lot of major revisions. I think the island and going to the last location, the island had some worthwhile revisions, but I felt was mostly kept the same as well.
Well, yeah, like you
Um,
didn't have to deal with like in the original, all you had to do was like point lasers at a door to progress, and this one you actually had to. It was a puzzle again, just like the
yeah.
castle. You had to like get around the lasers and figure out a way to make a path for yourself,
Hmm.
move
Yeah,
them around.
And a
and
lot of the maps in the island, especially in the first half, I feel are just verbatim the same as they were in original. It felt very
yeah,
familiar, and I really appreciated that.
but they also toned it down a bit in terms of like you no longer. Well, they kind of replaced the section where you're on the truck and everybody's diving on you. They replaced that kind of with
The
you guys
bulldozer
mentioned before.
or
Yeah, the
or
bulldozer,
the wrecking
a
ball,
wrecking ball.
Sorry.
But in terms of like the actual designs of the enemies, like it's much more subtler. They took out there were guys in the original with miniguns,
Yeah.
but they kind of replaced it with the bullhead, the new enemy, the bullhead guys. But they gave them like berserk. If anybody reads the manga, berserk, the auto crossbow that Guts has on his hand, they kind of gave it to that, and it's like a auto crossbow machine gun that they shoot at you.
Yeah.
And I feel like that enemy type is a little more in line with, because like it is a little jarring going to the island and suddenly it's just a bunch of militaristic ganados. I feel like the guy
Right.
with the boar head is like you fight them in the village as well, and they kind of fit with the tone a little more than just like this ganado general with a red cat or a red beret and a
Yeah.
minigun
Kind of
strapped to his
minigun,
back.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind the change to
No,
that.
neither do I. They still have like they got the mounted position, so if you fight your way to like a mounted machine gun, you can take it and just go to town on
Yeah.
guys, and the
Yeah.
enemies will
Oh,
use it against you. So
And talking a little more about enemies, I really like that that the Novista doors have more of a presence throughout the game, rather
Yes.
than just like, because they only had like a few core locations in the original, and here they kind of permeate throughout, including in the final boss. Sadler summons a whole horde of them.
Yeah,
Um,
they're much more tightly connected to like the origin of Plagas.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which I think is kind of cool.
They also
Um,
added that Demogorgon enemy type. I don't think was in the original. So like instead of the regular tentacles coming out, there was like this big Demogorgon. You get introduced to it when you first enter the castle.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. When you shoot off an enemy's head and the Plaga comes out.
Well, the Plaga comes out, that was in the original, but then there was like this
But
evolved
I know what you're talking,
Demogorgon version.
like the ones that have like the four like toothy flaps that can,
Yeah.
you can
Insta kill
parry them
you.
if you're fast enough, but they can eat your head off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um those are, I think those are new, and those are really, oh, actually probably the biggest improvement from the original in terms of enemies. They actually made the little spidery Plaga a fucking threat. And like
Yeah.
a really really big threat in this game, because in the original they're not threatening at all. They
No.
and they still die in like one or two shots here, but if they get on an enemy, you got to be fucking ready, because that enemy's
Uh,
going to come charging at
Run.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
especially on higher difficulties, if you're backtracking to areas where they replace the original um, enemies with some of those with normal enemies.
Yeah.
So you get like I was just playing on hardcore. You can get animation stun locked to death by like two or
Yeah.
three of those guys coming at you.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk more about, that with the gameplay, but it's not fun. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we've kind of transitioned to talking about some enemies, but like I just wanted to call those guys out because, man, I was not expecting them to be made into a threat, and they were probably one of my most hated enemies in this game, because if they latched onto an enemy and that enemy charged at you, you have to be fucking ready for it, because it's tough.
Yeah.
Um,
Even
orig-
the bug enemies. I don't remember them having camouflage in the
oh,
original.
the
Oh,
Novistadors,
they
yeah,
were
Yeah.
completely invisible in the originals.
They
they
were invisible, you're right.
And
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like there's a missed opportunity to have leaned into that aspect of them more here. But they did still disguise them as like rocks a whole lot.
Yeah, an achievement
Like
for taking them out before they.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. I felt like though in the original, even though they were invisible, you could still kind of see them.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
was
So
like it
if
was like blurry. It was kind of like um the almost
Predator
like with the
vision.
predator. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what.
and
Um
even with those enemies, I feel like they did a better job of like explaining them. Like it kind of reminded me. You ever saw the movie The Fly?
Yeah,
It kind of reminded me a bit of that story of how like people were like injecting this like bug stuff in to make them like bug people.
yeah. They definitely throughout everything with the game, throughout all the notes you find, they played into the body horror of the Las Plagas more than the original did.
Yeah.
yeah. We could just keep rolling with some enemies, especially as it pertains to the island. The regenerators are still just as terrifying as they've ever
Yeah.
been.
Mm.
And there was like a special kind of sadism by the developers when they
Yeah,
had like a whole room full of them in tanks, and like there's the one where you have to find the one that had ate the wrench and kill that to get the wrench, and then as you're waiting for the key card to get upgraded, enemies Morganato come running in, and one of them has dynamite, and he just starts flinging it willy-nilly. It's like, motherfucker, you are going to break out more of these regenerators. Please
Yeah.
stop. Like,
yeah,
um,
Yeah, that's why like I just tried taking care of them before because
yeah,
I died, and so I was like I'm just going to take care of them while they're in the tank one by one, and then yeah, that worked out
one
better
thing I
that way.
missed.
yeah,
I liked the regenerators overall in this. But one thing I missed was that soundtrack, that eerie music that played in the original when they came. I felt like they
yeah.
played a lot into into how scary they were in the original.
Yeah, because it was really uncomfortable music. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah.
tracks in the original soundtrack that just elicit discomfort, which I think is kind of a tenet to a good survival horror soundtrack. Honestly, Silent Hill is the big winner there, in my opinion. But like the music for the Regenerators in the original, yeah, you're right. It did play a lot into the horror of encountering those enemies, and I I feel like a lot of the motifs of the original soundtrack did carry through here, but that might not have carried through the best for the Regenerators. I kind of can't remember if it's as
Yeah.
poignant in this remake as it was in the original game. But
Well,
the enemies are like the Regenerators are faster here, and that was enough to just still freak me out
Hmm.
and still be one of my, it's weird to say favorite, but one of my favorite enemies in a survival horror game that actually elicits terror for me. Uh,
sure. And it doesn't if the music didn't make you uncomfortable, they had like big jiggly like boobs and booties.
you did. It was the first model I bought, so I could look at the look up close
The
at that
jiggle
booty,
physics.
jiggle it all around. Some people are buying Ashley's model to jiggle to jiggle her
Oh
ballistics
god, the
and
mods on this, some of the mods that have come out for this
Yeah.
game
oh
already.
well,
Yeah.
the mods for have been like uh, you can find some real Resident Evil degenerates
Oh yeah.
as early as Resident Evil 2. Like the mods for that
Yep.
game were like putting I think Leon in banana hammocks or maybe Mr. X in banana hammocks and stuff, having them parade around. Uh
Yes.
yeah, just some high level degeneracy amongst that fan base. Gotta love it. Um I guess let's if there's nothing more to say about some of the locations, we could talk about the boss fights a bit. What was your guys' favorite boss fight? Any notable ones you want to call out?
Hmm. I liked
They-
that Del Lago was largely the same, just with a
Yeah.
few added things. Um, but in terms of my favorites,
Ooh,
I'd
tough
have to
tough question.
say, I'd have to say the chief. I think.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I think.
I
I
might
don't know.
go I might go Vertigo. Like a completely optional boss fight, but they kind of changed up the whole liquid nitrogen thing a little bit. No longer tanks, but you gotta catch him in showers of the liquid nitrogen, and it kind of made for it was still somewhat of a familiar fight. They also expanded the arena you fight him in, the hallways. There's a few more winding ones.
I think Verdugo is a runner up for me. It had
Yeah,
been, you mentioned how many times we played the original.
yeah.
It had been a while since I actually like played him legit because
Okay, okay.
probably after the only time I ever played him legit was the first time I played Resident Evil 4.
Yeah,
After that, you always knew you bought a rocket launcher before you went into
yeah.
that area.
Either
Yeah.
that or a lot of mine darts and the mine
Yeah.
thrower.
Mhm.
But Delilah, what about you? What's your favorite?
I think Krauser, I just feel like the parry mechanic in this game is fantastic, and like having that Krauser fight made it feel like a really watered down Sekiro fight because you're just like constantly parrying his attacks and making sure you're evading on time. And then you had like that moment of quiet when you were first fought him where you're going through the cave and then you have a knife fight with him again. I just felt like the pacing of that fight was immaculate.
I I I I would say that Krauser is definitely up there for me. The one thing that annoyed me was just that you had to start from the very beginning when you died.
Oh
So
yeah.
like, and there's like all that cinematic stuff that goes on, and you have to traverse that entire area. But otherwise, I agree with you.
Was that
Like,
a hardcore thing? Because I didn't have to start over from the beginning every time I died.
no, when I died on normal, I had to start from the very beginning.
That's weird. Okay. Maybe it depends on where at what point in the
Maybe
sequence you die. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. What was I do feel that some of the boss fights, as far as they compare to their original counterparts, are a little weaker. Delilah, I know you mentioned you felt the Salazar boss fight was probably the hardest.
The
I also
hardest, but like not in a good way.
yeah, and
yeah, it was.
I don't think it's an improvement over the original fight. Um,
No.
I think
You're referring to like all the crap that he leaves on the
The
ground that you
spitty
can't really.
bullshit. Like, what the
Yeah,
hell?
and the one-shot kills that like sometimes because of the animation lock you can't escape. Yeah,
So I'm gonna hit you guys since we're kind of about to dive into combat discussion a little bit. I'm gonna hit you guys with a hot take. I miss QuickTime events. They're
no,
like
I agree with you.
they're like kind of here, but they're so seldom and like they're not obvious. There's like occasionally a prompt to press circle to evade will show up, but I feel like we needed more of that. Like QuickTime events were never an implicitly bad thing. They were just bad when they were overused and stupidly implemented. Resident Evil 6, big offender of that. There's a lot of really dumb contextual button prompts and QuickTime events in that game. But in 4, the only times they were bad were like when you had to mash X to sprint away from a boulder. Otherwise, to dodge enemy attacks and stuff, they served a purpose. They were worth having, and kind of removing them as much as this game did, I feel was like they got a little spooked by the potential backlash of having QuickTime events in this game, and I kind of think it's a shame because I think they would have worked pretty well in the majority of the boss fights.
Hmm.
And instead, getting rid of them almost entirely. Again, occasionally there's a circle button to evade, mostly in like Krauser's boss fight, but like the original Salazar fight, if you play it legit without just one-shotting him with a rocket launcher, like there's a lot of positioning. Like the strategy comes in where your positioning is, dodging his attacks effectively and making sure you can you shoot him as required. Here,
Right.
it's just like kind of manically running around the arena, trying to find when you can take pot shots when he stops moving around, and like you have no chance of avoiding the spitty bullshit, as Delilah so lovingly put it. Um,
Right.
it's like I feel like I understand why they removed them, but I also think they shouldn't have removed them to the extent that they did. I think they did serve a purpose, and they just had to make sure that they kept the core purpose behind having them in the original here, and they could have worked really well. Um,
I agree with you for the Salazar fight. I feel
okay,
like avoiding his spit with a quick time event would have been better than having to like time how you run around it or and avoid it.
yeah.
Because they did do the quick time, like you said, for the Krauser fight as well as for Mendez.
And
Like they
Verdugo.
and
Verdu
Verdugo, yeah.
like I said, they're there. They're definitely there, but I feel like they weren't as present as I feel like they should have been.
Hmm.
And it just made a lot of boss fights really frustrating. It kind of like they made a lot of boss fights feel like the same way they feel in Resident Evil 2 and 3, where it's like take a few shots and then run away. Take a few shots and run away. And that just doesn't make for a very interesting fight. And what
It's
made Resident
also just very different from the original.
Yeah, yeah, because what part of what makes the original so special and what makes that combat work so well is like you're never on your back foot unless you like just completely ignore the mechanics. Like you are on the offensive, they go to attack, usually you get a you usually get a quick time event to dodge the attack. And if you fail it, well that's on you. You need to up your reaction time and effectively press those buttons quicker. Here it's once again it's more like Resident Evil 2 and 3, like early Resident Evil games, boss fight mechanics. It's take pot shots when you can, run away. Take pot shots, run
Well,
away.
let me hit you with an even bigger hot take because
Oh
I've
boy.
been thinking about this for weeks since I first on normal, been playing it more. Very much enjoyed the game, but I've been listening to others talk and thinking myself, which do I like better? And I came to the realization that saying overall which game is better, the original or the remake, is a dumb question because they're, I would argue, different genres, completely different game feels.
Hmm.
Resident Evil
Well,
4, the
yeah, for
original.
sure.
So when Resident Evil 4, the original came out, everybody said it's not survival horror anymore. It's action horror, is I think the term that was used. I would argue no. Resident Evil 4 was an arcade action shooter. It wasn't even horror. It was very fast paced, very precise. The controls, you had lasers on everything. Where you shot, where the laser was where you hit. Leon was very quick, even with the tank controls. He was very easy. There wasn't, the animations were all very smooth. Precise, fast paced. That's how I would describe the original. This game, with you have much more momentum. You feel the character movements. The animations kind of lag behind it to give some weight to the characters. You don't got well, you have lasers, but generally it's not that precise one for one hit. You have bloom, you have recoil, and resources are much tighter in this game as opposed to the original. I would say, if anything, this remake is more survival action than the original was. I think the original was more just an action third person shooter, whereas the remake tries to incorporate more survival elements, which leads to what you're saying, where you have to consider your movement, your momentum. You have to consider how long you have. These mechanics are guaranteed to hit you if you don't move, or if
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying. It's more
Totally, yeah.
It's more tactical. It's slower than the original, and it's more deliberate.
You wouldn't think it, but adding or change, because original Resident Evil 4, whether you realize it or not, that you're using tank controls when you're playing that game. You just don't realize it because there's no fixed camera angle.
It's
It's
so
always
fast and
behind.
precise. Yeah,
Yeah, well, placing the camera behind Leon's shoulder, like it changed Resident Evil, but it also changed
change gaming.
it changed gaming.
Gears
But
of War would not exist. Well, maybe it would. Who knows?
there's a
But
lot of games that wouldn't
yeah,
exist without Resident Evil 4
But
taking
I
control.
mentioned Gears just because it was directly
Yeah,
influenced by
right.
RE4. Yeah,
Right. But my point being is, like, you're using tank controls in Resident Evil 4, original Resident Evil 4. Those are tank controls. When you press the left button, Leon turns left. When you press right, he turns right. He doesn't move right. He doesn't move left. He turns that way, and
right.
forward is the only way to get him to move forward. It's just all relative to the camera's positioning, which is always behind Leon, so it doesn't feel as cumbersome as tank controls did. Adding freedom of movement really changes the design in a very, very major way.
They have to
And
slow Leon down.
yeah, it's not an easy change. Like, people that complain about it in the original game, like, oh, I just wish I could freely move Leon. Well, it's like, well, no, then you're changing the design of how that combat works in a fundamental way. It's not just an easy switch, and here they definitely does have a very, very different feel. And I don't want to talk. There's something else I want to talk about, but I want to give Delilah a chance to talk.
Yeah.
She has something.
Sorry,
to bring up.
sorry. I added my rant, my hot
No.
take right after yours.
I'm glad you brought it up, because it's something I want to talk about.
Yeah. I agree with you guys, especially like having come off of playing the original. It does feel like this one tried to marry action and horror. Like, in the original, I felt like I would empty my entire clip of whatever the hell to the enemies, because it felt like a House of the Dead kind of thing. Like, you're just focusing
Right.
on getting rid of it, clearing, right? Like you said, arcadey. In this one, I found myself wanting to restart on purpose so that I use my resources more effectively to get through the combat. Whereas in the original, I didn't. And I don't know if that's because I played on hardcore my first time playing this one. In the original, I just played on normal. But I do feel like there was more resource management in this one than in the original, which I didn't mind. But
it's worth noting that the original, and not a lot of people realize this, and there were probably games that tried before, I don't know, but this was the first game that really successfully did it. The original RE4 had an adaptive difficulty working behind the scenes that not only changed the difficulty of encounters based on how well you were doing, but also fed you ammo if you were running low, fed you healing items. Here, there's a lot more RNG, and not just with item drops, but also with how your weapons function, which is why I say it's more of a survival game. I don't think the original was much of a survival game at all, which is why so many RE fans hated it. This one is. You have to manage your resources, account for the fact that shots that look like they should hit might just go off because a statistic on your gun and the algorithm in the game says it should. You're also going to have to account for the RNG of, items that drop. Are you going to get healing items, like you said, Delilah? And it only gets worse as difficulties go up, because they mess with the resources, how fast they drop.
I do think there is some adaptive difficulty present in this game as well. At least in the drops, like, if I was low on health, low on healing items, I would get more healing item drops from enemies naturally. Like, it's like do we want to call that adaptive difficulty, or do we want to call that just like something built into the game to make sure items that you actually need are dropping and not like crap that you don't need? I guess you could look at that as adaptive difficulty. Another core change that I think fundamentally changes how this game is played into more of a survival game, and this is something that I kind of don't like. But it's something that I expected just because this is every Resident Evil game since 7 has had this ammo crafting.
Mm.
Yep.
The drop economy has significantly changed because you're not just getting handgun ammo or shotgun ammo or submachine gun ammo. You're getting gunpowder
Mm-hmm.
and resources small or resources large, and you have to craft your own ammo, which gives like some freedom of like, okay, I really really like submachine guns, I'm gonna save all my gunpowder and large resources to make that kind of ammo. I just don't really think that leads into an interesting dynamic gameplay scenario. I kind of prefer the kind of shoot from the hip approach of what the game gives you is what the game gives you, and
Yeah.
generally it tries to give you ammo for weapons that you need it for. If you're low on handgun ammo, I think the percentage naturally increasing to give you handgun ammo as an enemy drop, that's fine. I think adding ammo crafting kind of just makes an issue, quote unquote. I don't think it's an issue, but it makes the issue of inventory management worse just by making you have 2 or to 3 additional things that you have to carry around with you, so you can make more ammo when happen in a pinch, you know.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
I felt it was an unnecessary addition, but like I said, every Resident Evil game since 7 has had ammo crafting. I mean, if we want to go back, the original Resident Evil 3 had ammo crafting, but like we went through a ton of games that didn't have it for a while until 7 reintroduced it, and now it's been a mainstay. I not
Yeah.
a huge fan of that. Go ahead,
I
Laura.
feel like for Resident Evil 4, I prefer that they just give me the ammo and I use whatever ammo I have.
Right.
It just made me like feel like switching my weapons more and just trying different things. Whereas being able to choose my ammo, yeah, sure, it gives me a choice, but it just like kind of shoehorns me into the same guns that I'm comfortable with, and I like being forced to use something different. I don't like either direction more. I appreciate the differences, but I feel like there was something special about Resident Evil 4 being so action focused that having to switch to the ammo that you had left just made it feel more kinetic rather than like, okay, let me craft this thing and then switch my weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, as Mark said in the beginning of this whole discussion that this game doesn't replace the original, I think this is actually more so even than the story maybe a bigger reason is that they're just fundamentally different games.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with that. They feel completely different. They play completely different. Even if um they're both third person shooters in the most broad sense, they play and feel completely different from one another.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of the reasons that we're laying out, and it's always gonna come down to like, which way do you prefer? Do you prefer one way or the other? And it's hard to separate myself from all the time that I've spent on the original game because I've obviously played it a lot.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I
so
wanna be clear here that I don't say that they're different games as a criticism. I do have criticisms of this game, and I don't think that it is as much of a masterpiece that the original was in terms of just raw gameplay. However, I still enjoyed the hell out of this game.
oh, the way I put it to a friend of mine when just talking about this game, if original Resident Evil 4 is a 10, which it is in my opinion,
Yeah.
the new Resident Evil 4, the remake Resident Evil 4 is a 9.5. It is very very close to being a 10, but there's just a few things that for me hold it back a little.
Hmm.
Um another kind of nitpicky thing, since I brought up inventory management, I one thing that I absolutely abhor, um I think the case customization is stupid. I think
Okay, so this is where they add microtransactions, sort of.
kind of, yeah. Um I think it's really dumb, guys. I really, first of all, I just want to talk about the attaché cases themselves. In that, two of them were a pre-order bonus, and if you don't
Yes.
have those two pre-order bonus ones, there's only three in the game.
Yeah.
Like at that point, why bother? Like why have this mechanic?
Yeah.
If anyone buys it after the fact, and unless they make this pre-order bonus available to everyone at some point, like there's only three attaché cases that you can have that, and those are the ones that increase handgun ammo drops, increase large resource drops, and I
Red
think
herbs.
increase red herbs. The other two that you can get increase from the pre-order bonus, increase gunpowder and pesetas.
Yeah, and it's interesting again because on the surface, there's some, especially the red herbs, depending on the difficulty you're playing through, that's a major boost, but
Yeah.
it's a percentage chance. So again, it's
Yeah.
that RNG element that permeates just about every facet of this game that I'm not a super fan of, but I understand because, as we all said earlier, there's much more survival focus in this than the original,
Yeah.
or at
And
least
like
the mechanics of a survival game. Yeah.
yeah, and like making the charms that you can get from the shooting range, like fine, if you want to have some customization, I think having those is the best you can do. Rather than maybe giving a percent chance on them, just say like increase drop rate of this or something, Get that's I guess as fine as it can get in terms of giving you a reward for the shooting range, but making them a fucking gumball gotcha and having like the chances of getting a very common one still pretty high when you put in three
3
gold
gold.
tokens. Yeah.
Yes.
You know how many times I wasted three gold tokens to get a common charm that I already fucking had?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just it's not fun. It's very demoralizing, and it's all part of a mechanic that I don't think needed to be there in the first place.
I
I don't
feel like yeah. I feel like they're trying to play with some multiplayer aspect there. Like that and also like the mechanic of like reviving Ashley and shit like that. I feel like they're trying to experiment with something that I feel like is gonna
Well,
be bad.
it's
next
almost like
game
you
on the
think
list.
it's
Yeah.
almost like you think Resident Evil eventually goes co-op to Lila. I
Yeah.
don't know. That's ludicrous. I don't think that would ever happen.
Yeah.
Um, no, I take your point. Like I could see the kind of beta test that they're doing there. I just think in this game it doesn't work, and it's very unnecessary and very stupid, and I don't like it. Especially with the thing I said about the attaché cases. In the core game, there's not a whole lot of them. Why bother?
Yeah.
It's just dumb. It's either like if they were gonna do that, then two of them should not have been exclusive to a pre-order bonus.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe one of them at max. In my opinion, neither of them. They all should have been in the game. But it's lame.
Yeah, and then you can use like Spinel to buy like exclusive upgrade tickets to get that last upgrade
Yeah,
per
well,
gun.
let's talk about the progression system because like weapon upgrades are still pretty much the same, and the exclusive upgrades are still kind of the same. But and this kind of ties in with something else that I had in the notes about just the merchant requests. What did you guys think of the merchant requests and kind of adding like side quests to this game?
They kind of had it in the original, but like less. Like there was just blue medallions in the first section of the game rather than
Right.
like sprinkled throughout the rest of the game. And I do think that some of the side quests were cool. Like, yeah, maybe not shooting, snakes and selling them, but like fighting like these
Mini
like beefed
bosses.
up
Yeah.
versions, yeah, the mini bosses of like the dog and the armored dude um and the regenerator
Yeah.
was really cool. And they did something like that in Resident Evil 8 as well, and I liked that. But when it came to just doing like blue medallions everywhere, I was like, yeah, I could have used without it. It just felt like
Kill the
busy
rats.
work.
Kill the
Yeah,
rats.
which
Yeah.
then made me kill every fucking rat in the game when I didn't need to. you know?
Yeah.
um I think doing the blue medallions repeatedly, doing the rats repeatedly was a lot. It was unnecessary. I think the more unique ones, like probably my favorite merchant request, um,
Throwing the egg.
throwing the egg, defile the portrait of Salazar. I think that was really creative.
Yeah, it was fun.
And I mean, it was simple. It was super easy to do, but like, it's just really creative. And I think we needed more of those creative side quests in this game. Like the best ones are the ones that you only do once, and they're super creative.
Yeah.
The one where you have to find
Follow the grow to the nest.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That one was really cool. It's because it was a one-off. It was unique, and you never did it again. It's
And
just,
if you're like me and you accidentally shoot the crow, then you just got to wander around and look for. I mean, it's not impossible. I eventually found the nest,
I
but
I think I did that, and it didn't die, and that's what made me realize, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to kill this,
Yeah.
or supposed to try. You were able to kill it?
yeah, I was able. I
Oh,
shot him.
interesting. Maybe I missed it when I shot at it. I don't know. But yeah, and I do like the idea of using spinels as a unique currency to get unique rewards. Like a lot of the weapon stocks were only
Yeah.
obtainable via that. I really liked that system. I thought that was really cool. Um, I think the introduction of exclusive upgrade tickets was really, like, I didn't really care for it, and then now that's kind of switched to just a complete dislike of it, because that's now a microtransaction. You
Yeah.
can buy exclusive upgrade tickets for real money, which is a thing that Capcom loves to do now. They loved for I don't know about any of their other franchises other than Resident Evil and Devil May Cry, but you can just purchase all of the end game unlocks and stuff for real money. I'm sure that will be added to Resident Evil 4 down the line, because it's been added to every other Resident Evil game, I think.
Yeah.
Modern Resident Evil game, and I think that's just incredibly lame. Like, and then Devil May Cry, I know there's microtransactions where you can just buy a ton of red orbs, and it's just like, why? Just
Yeah.
why do this? Just to get a few bucks here and there from suckers that don't know any better?
Well, it's also
Um,
like, I don't know. Maybe this is like a me problem, but like, for example, in Resident Evil 2, just earning to get the infinite rocket launcher was so difficult. And then when they added DLC where you could just buy it, I was just like, it just took away from it. Like, I felt like I
yeah.
didn't feel as rewarded for what I did. And even though I know I earned it legit or whatever, it's still like, I don't know, it just takes away from the old schoolness of like earning a weapon.
Yeah, and
Right.
to be clear, like, that's not present within Resident Evil 4 yet. Who knows what microtransactions they're going to add to this game down the line. Like I said, they're probably going to add something to have like end game unlocks for unlock all the end game stuff for $5 or something.
Right.
It's probably going to be some
Right.
stupid shit like that eventually. They've already added buy exclusive upgrade tickets.
Mhm.
You can buy the whole batch of them for like $10. You get 5 of them or something. I don't remember the prices. But I just, it's unnecessary, and I think the whole exclusive upgrade ticket mechanic in the game kind of feels like it was only invented for the use of microtransactions.
In the
Yeah.
same way that like the special edition, you get weapons that are a like that shotgun that you get. And I didn't even realize this at first. I was wondering why when I started the game I had these weapons in storage,
Yeah,
but I guess it was because
the
I
deluxe
accidentally
edition.
bought the deluxe edition. Yeah, and you get a weapon that is effectively for most of the game like a pay to win mechanic because it takes up less space and has as much, if not more, power than some of the earlier shotguns.
Yeah, I think the handgun you get and the shotgun you get, like, yeah, they take up less space, and they're like slightly better. It's like the usual deluxe edition or pre-order thing where like it's stuff that's better than the default starting stuff, but only for a little while, and then eventually stuff outpaces it.
Yeah.
But like, it's effectively 2 additional weapons that you just have and can upgrade and stuff, and it's kind of like, why,
Hmm.
why? What purpose does this add to the game?
Yeah.
And in this case, it would be different if they were like iconic Resident Evil weapons. They're not. They're just additional weapons for no reason.
Yeah.
Um, kind of still along the same lines, but another big change that I really liked is the changes to the treasure system.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Um,
a lot more min-maxing, which is one of the positives of adding more survival elements. Is there's a lot more freedom, and like you said before, you mentioned the spinels. Yeah, you can use them for upgrades. You can use them for different cool weapon things. You can also use them to enhance your peseta income by
yeah,
getting different kinds of treasures and
there's
different kinds of jewels.
yeah, there's the limitless trades for velvet blues and stuff. So if there's nothing else that you want to use your spinels on, you can just buy treasure to sell infinitely. Um,
Yeah.
it is pretty nice. And that aspect's really cool. I really like how the treasures, um, there's no longer like set treasures that slot into set things. They're all very generic, but like it's all up to you to seek out those gemstones and how you want to apply your bonuses. It's much more modular. You have to put some thought into it, and like you might wind up prematurely selling a treasure at a lower value just because you really need the money, or you can suffer through, hold on to that treasure until you get the right combination of gemstones
Yeah.
to place into it and sell it at the best time. Really liked that. I thought it was really clever and really cool.
That was a mechanic in 8, right? I feel like I remember doing that in 8 as well. Like,
No,
I
eight
barely remember eight.
8 didn't really have much in terms of things you could combine together. All the treasures in 8 were very much like you either just sell it or there's only two components and they're bound to be combined together. This is
right.
ostensibly a very new mechanic for Resident Evil where they're very modular treasures that you could just decide how
You're
you
right.
want to
There were
combine them.
you're in 8 there were specific things that only went together and you had to find both of those
Yeah.
things to
And
combine it, whereas
it
yeah.
was like you could get the doll head and the doll body and then combine
Right.
them to make the doll. It was like
Yeah,
very simple stuff like that. It didn't even come close to like original Resident Evil 4's treasure system.
totally.
And this, I think, is just a really cool change. I'm not gonna sit here and say I think it's better than the original. Maybe I kind of do think it's better than the original treasure system.
Again,
That
it's
feels better. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
like I was saying earlier. It's different and better for what this new game is. I think.
Well,
Yeah.
what I like, one of the things I like about it is in the original, since the treasures were so, you needed very specific gemstones to fit into them, like specific shapes, specific types, whatever. If you missed one of those in the original, well, you're not completing that treasure for the rest of the playthrough. Like
Hmm.
if you missed a cat's eye, you're not getting another cat's eye. Not another one's not going to show up. Here it's all like if you missed a ruby, don't worry, you're gonna get like half a dozen of them within the next few chapters.
We'll also keep in mind in this one, you're also you're continually spending more money on things other than just weapon upgrades or new weapons or upgrades to your cache. You're repairing things all the time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, how did you guys feel about the knife durability? I mean, we haven't talked about parrying much other than Delilah mentioning she loves it. Spoilers, I really liked it too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Delilah.
no, please. I already my soapbox about it.
No, I do. I do like the knife parry mechanic. My only issue was that, and most of the things you can't parry are pretty obvious that you couldn't parry it. But there are some things that seem like you should, and you go to do it and you can't. Um, Also, the game can be kind of finicky with some of the knife button inputs in general,
Hmm.
and some attacks can only be dodged with circle, which feels a little weird to me on the controller when I'm leaning towards L to be ready to parry, but then I gotta switch. I don't know. Maybe it's just me and I'm messed up. But I actually didn't mind having to repair the knives. I more got really pissed about the body armor, especially on harder
Mm,
difficulties because it's so goddamn expensive. It's like 10 grand to for a full repair if it's broken,
yeah.
and it only takes like one or two hits just on hardcore, not to mention like professional,
Yeah, I don't
and it's
think
almost essential.
yeah, I can't remember. Could you upgrade the body armor, or was it kind of just a thing where you bought it and then you had to repair it and there was
You
no
just
upgrade
buy
for it?
it, yeah,
I think maybe that body armor could have benefited from an actual like being part of the upgrade system.
or just being a static upgrade.
Yeah, like it was in the original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just have like multiple tiers of body armor or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair. But yeah,
I,
go
I
ahead,
didn't mind the
Delano.
durability only because it's like you're 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 getting punished for getting grabbed, but it's also a way out. So like, you would lose more durability if you got grabbed and use the knife as a way out of getting grabbed so that you can survive, not lose much health. When you parried, it minimally took away the durability, so it's not like they punish you for parrying, which was a mechanic, but also you couldn't just parry everything to death, which then would make you overpowered and make the game boring and very easy. So I like how they played with how durability is used differently depending on what you use it for, and I felt like the amount of durability you lost per thing made sense for the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't like how expensive like Jason said it was to like repair it, but that's just because I want to buy everything.
Well,
Yeah.
once again, I feel like it kind of plays into ammo crafting, or a similar way to the ammo crafting, in my opinion, where the whole durability system kind of feels like another excuse to make you get other smaller, weaker knives in your inventory, and thus once again compound the issue of it's just more shit to manage in your attaché case.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where that plays into. But I also don't mind the idea of I don't mind it as much as I do ammo crafting. I think ammo crafting is a much more annoying system.
Hmm.
But that's also because I just hate when games have. I mean, if you listen to past episodes, and you're getting to know me and my tastes, like you probably know when an arbitrary crafting system is present, I can't stand it.
Yeah.
Because it just feels tacked on and unnecessary. But yeah, the durability didn't bother me too much. I think a more playing into the durability thing. I think a more questionable combat addition is the stealth mechanics. How'd you guys feel about that?
The game, like, I feel like just stealth doesn't work for Resident Evil 4, period.
I agree.
And I just think, like, I would rather use my knife to parry than to stealth kill an enemy because guess what? The next enemy is gonna see me anyway, so whatever. I used it, but it was like almost not worth it. I'd rather like just
Yeah.
parry the enemy.
It
It's
was
like
it was useful for maybe clearing one or two enemies from any given arena if you really wanted to go through the trouble, but at the end of the day, it was unnecessary.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was a useful mechanic when it was convenient to use, but I don't think I think if it was removed, I wouldn't miss it at all. I don't, and I agree that I don't think it was necessary. Um,
I like the
like
contextual stuff they did. Like I don't know if you would categorize this under the stealth system, but they basically used the same um, contextual button press with the Garradors that you could
yeah,
sneak around them and do that. I loved that. Getting that trophy was fun.
yeah, they and like they never force you to use the stealth, the stealth mechanics, but with instances of the Garrador, it actually made for a really tense encounter. That's like the one instance where I would say that it was a good addition, is
Hmm.
doing but like at the same time, the same thing could be accomplished how it was in the original. Don't run, just walk,
Yeah.
and you're essentially still sneaking around the Garradors.
Right.
Um, if they did the same thing and still allowed for the contextual button pressed of stabbing the Plaga, it would have accomplished the same thing. So, yeah, I think stealth, largely an unnecessary inclusion to the combat, didn't really do much for me.
Yeah.
So there's just one more thing I want to talk about before we can probably wrap up. And that's future content, right? We just got the mercenaries mode released. Um, and it's fun. I've never really been a big Mercs person, but it's fun. It's there. I think it should have been there on release, but at least it was free and released 2 weeks after the game came out, so
Hmm.
it's not a huge loss. I'm not gonna complain about that nearly as much as I have in the past about post game content in these games. One thing I do want to know your guys' thoughts on is there's been a rumor from a data mine seeing some mentions of separate ways, and do you guys think that we are getting separate ways content, and do you think it'll be free or will it cost something? For the uninitiated who might not know, separate ways was one of those PlayStation 2 exclusive or new bits of content that was essentially a whole additional campaign where you play as Ada and you see her perspective throughout the story. So yeah,
I
what
think
do you guys
they're
think?
gonna charge for it because I feel like they're gonna give it the remake treatment that they gave
Oh.
this game, and I think they might even add to it because Separate Ways was the first time that we like heard Ada speaking to Wesker, I think, in like a
Technically, Assignment Ada was, which was a non-canon additional mode that was on the original GameCube release.
Yeah.
okay.
Because like in the original, this is a story change that we didn't even discuss. Like in the original game, Leon flat out knows A, that Ada survived Raccoon City, and B, is working for Wesker when he first meets up with her in the original game.
Right.
Here he kind of finds out Ada's alive when she meets with him, and he doesn't know who she's working for.
Hmm.
So in the original game, Assignment Ada, like by the time you get to play Assignment Ada, you know Ada's working for Wesker, and you do see like a conversation with her and Wesker in that like little mode, but that mode's non-canon. I think you
Oh,
do
okay.
see
Yeah.
actual canonical conversations with her and Wesker in separate ways.
Yeah. It's where yeah. Operation or Assignment Ada was not very well received, and that's why a lot of people were pissed when
Well, it
the
was
PS2 version.
fun.
It,
It
it
was a
was
fun
fun,
little extra, but
but people were pretty upset when the PS2 version came out with Separate Ways, which was just all around much better.
yeah, yeah, because for you're dealing with the whole broken promise of that game staying exclusive, and
Yeah.
not only is it no longer exclusive to the GameCube, it has more content.
But I agree with Delilah. They'll probably charge for it as a DLC add-on to this game, but it will probably also come with like more content, maybe even for the base game. Who knows?
Okay.
Um, I think it. I think they'll definitely go through with that. I think it's probably already in works. It's already been developed. Obviously, there was data mining regarding it.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm
but I mean, am I super hyped about it? I never really liked either Assignment Ada or Separate Ways to begin with. They were fun like one time, and that was really it.
oh.
Yeah.
I mean, I would never say I would never say Separate Ways was better than like the core game of Resident Evil 4, but it was a nice supplement to the story
Yeah.
to see Ada's side of things, see some additional plot moments. She had a one or two exclusive weapons
Yes.
that were fun to use. The bow gun especially was really cool.
Well, there were also unlocks for the main thing through that, weren't there?
I think that was how you unlocked the Chicago typewriter.
Yes. Yes.
Which obviously is unlocked a different way in this game, but yeah,
I mean, it would certainly be interesting to see what change because they would have to make changes.
yeah.
Because they changed the base game.
Oh, another fun weapon that was removed in this remake was the Plaga removal laser
Yeah.
that you
Oh
get from being a
yeah.
professional. That's just totally gone, which is kind of a bummer. But yeah, I agree with you guys. I think it will be charged. It'll probably be another thing like the Ethan Winters expansion for
Yeah.
Village was, where you unlock this new campaign, and then you also that's probably where they'll also shoehorn in some updates to Mercenaries, where you can play as more characters. I believe it was also data mined, but Wesker is supposed to be a Mercs character, so that's probably where he'll be added as a Mercs character. Um, and stuff like that's probably
Yeah.
where they'll add that stuff. Who knows, maybe they'll like how they added third person mode to Village in that expansion, maybe they'll add a first person mode to Resident Evil 4 remake.
That's funny.
Only time will tell when we get the Leon Scott Kennedy expansion.
um there was a few things that I wanted to say before we wrap up.
Okay.
Um I guess like I wanted to ask you guys like what was your favorite moment in this remake? Like favorite set piece? Or actually let's start with favorite location.
like broadly between the
Broadly,
village.
village, castle, island.
It's always village.
I would say the village too. It's the comfiest. When I think Resident Evil 4, I think of the village first and
Yeah.
foremost.
For me, it is the village, but there was something about the progression of like when you're in the house with Luis and Ashley, and you're having like you're boarding up the windows, and you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
all these ganados coming after you. I've never been so happy to see Ashley in my life. That and then going into the castle and then like dropping to the floor and entering the dungeon with the clawed enemies. I always forget what they're called
Garradors.
officially. The
Garradors, yeah.
Garradors, right? Just like the aesthetics of that entire section was just chef's kiss. Like it was so unnerving seeing the claws on like the guys that are hanging. They had like scratches all over them. There was blood all over the place. There were chains hanging. It was just like really well done. And even the way those enemies died, they went down like slashing. I don't think those animations were as well fleshed out in the original, and I just
Yeah.
that was like just my favorite section, going from the village to the castle.
The castle is
Honestly,
definitely much darker than it was in the original.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
honestly say the Garradors are probably in the original and in this remake probably my favorite enemy.
Yeah.
Just because the design is so cool, the idea behind them is so neat, and they that while they're handicapped, they are still a major threat, and they have such a unique way of dealing with them that I really like them as a threat, as an enemy.
Yeah. You can also use them, and you can also use cows and pigs too as a way to like fight enemies
Yeah.
for you, like luring them to like hordes of enemies. I thought was really really fun.
A lot of cool, almost like Metal Gear type details in the gameplay like that, in the
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, like even just like the combat sandbox in this game is still it's still very present. Like there's lots of times where more than ever I'm shooting enemies not in the head but in the leg just to knock them on their knees so I can give them a swift kick to conserve ammo and deal a lot of damage really quickly. Like this game feels really good to play. And
Although it is notable that in the original, one shot was a guaranteed fall for the enemy, as opposed to here, where
yeah,
sometimes it takes two, sometimes it takes one, sometimes
and
it takes three. You don't really know.
I think that's
Mhm.
just like these modern Resident Evil games. Like it was kind of shocking playing Resident Evil 2 remake, and it would take an abnormal amount of shots to kill an enemy. Like I
Yeah,
feel like they were just almost bullet spongy, and that still is a little present here. Not as bad, but still, like you're right. Shooting an enemy in the leg once is not enough sometimes.
Yeah. Especially on hardcore. You shoot them like 6 times and
Yeah.
then you could kick them.
Man, I'm having trouble answering. You know what? No, I think I know my answer. My answer is taking the cut scene with Leon and Krauser doing the knife fight and making it an actual fight.
Mm.
I agree. That was one of my favorite parts of the game. I don't know
That
about the favorite, but it's definitely one of my favorites.
that one really I really liked that. I thought it was really cool. Like that's one instance where I'm like, yes, good. You did not leave in the cutscene. You did not leave this as QTEs. You have made this like an actual playable thing that takes skill, and I think that's really really cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's other things that we haven't talked about, like other areas that were cut from the game. We didn't even talk about the fact that U3 was cut.
Oh yeah, I was thinking about it earlier, but I forgot to bring it up.
Yeah, like U3 was cut. The underground ruins at the mines and some of the ruins at the mines of the like outside the castle or by the castle were cut. But like, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's not a big deal. They added a lot of new stuff, and like I said, this isn't erasing the original game. They both coexist. They're both awesome, and
Yeah.
I'm Jason, we did it. I'm amazed that this game came out and we both really liked it. And
Yep.
I'm so happy to come here to this episode, to this show, and tell you guys that, because I gotta say I was nervous, and
As
I've
was
said
I.
for years, Resident Evil 4 does not need a remake, and I still don't think it needed one, but I'm kind of glad it got one.
No, this is fantastic. It's the best game I played this year.
Yeah, it speaks for itself that this is one of the first new games that we've done for this. Like, leaving aside classics that we've gone back to, I played this. Well, I didn't finish completely my second playthrough, but I almost finished it. So I was playing through it more than once in preparation for this podcast. So
Yeah.
that says a lot. I've never done that
Jason
before
doesn't
with
do
any of
that
Yeah.
a
our other
lot.
games. Yeah.
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 So for as much criticism as myself and you guys are giving it, mostly because we've already said so many good things, and there's only so much you can just say good about it without like
Yeah.
falling into all right. So it's just that the criticism stands out. This is an amazing game that they put out here. And I agree with Mark. I'm glad I wasn't horrified by what they did to my baby.
Yeah. Um. All right. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up before the final question?
As
Nope.
the resident Latina of the trio,
Oh,
I
here we
have to
go.
ask what kind of Spanish you guys learned.
None.
If anything. You didn't really? There was no line that the Ganados repeated over and over again that you were like,
it was all stuff they said in the original, but I never really bothered to learn. I heard one thing where it sounded like a Ganado called me something, and I was like, wait, does that mean what I think it means?
Well,
Why, Delilah? Enlighten us. What are some of your favorite Ganado lines?
I think this wasn't really in the original as much, but like there was one Ganado that every time it would go to kill you, it would scream sangre, 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 which is like
yeah,
blood, 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 blood.
yeah.
Okay.
And
No,
then
I remember in the
yeah.
original they would whisper, and this was a really clever thing they did gameplay wise. They would whisper what if they were to your side or behind you. They would say like from behind, from the right, from the left, but they would do it in Spanish. So it was like a little like thing. If you knew Spanish, you could use the audio cues to know. Oh shit, someone's coming up from behind or the right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like they didn't overuse like Moridas Vivir in the remake like they did in the
Oh my god.
original.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
To
To die is to
die
live.
is to live,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh man, there were those we didn't even talk about these guys. The fucking red robed cultists that would make
Oh,
the plaga explode out of enemies. And they
yeah.
would be like, Gloria a las plagas!
Yes.
Gloria a las
Las
plagas!
Plagas. There you go.
Those ones were terrible. Yeah, that's probably the one line of Spanish that's ingrained in my mind because it's like, oh fuck.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm about to deal with some bad shit right now.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want to bring up? Talk about?
I just thought the puzzles
No.
were better
Oh yeah,
overall.
we didn't really even talk about puzzles. I do think some of them were better.
The
I
sword
I like
puzzle.
that they used more environmental. You had to actually look around, be aware of what was around you for some of them. Some of them you actually had to like think. Which is fun
Yeah.
because in the originals you didn't have to think. It's just like, oh, here's a
Well,
switch, press the switch. Here it's like, oh, there are 4 pictures, they form a story, and based on that, you got to figure out which sword goes where. Like it's cool.
Yeah, Delilah, you called out the sword one, and yeah, that was such a noted improvement because before it was just there's 2 swords, they're both in the place that the other one needs to be in. It's
Right.
not a puzzle. It's just moving 2 things. It's not. It takes no thought whatsoever. But here, it was really cool. It was that like it was a story, and you had to figure out which one goes in the right place. It was really neat. Another one that I really liked. Oh crap! I just had it. Oh, the puzzles in the regenerator lab. Those were actually pretty challenging. Trying to figure out how to connect the power to the
Right.
little circuit things to actually power the doors and stuff. Those were really cool, and one of them really stumped me for a while.
Same.
I liked the change that they made to the stained glass puzzle early on. I thought that was really cool. There's one for a treasure, the hexagon pieces. That was really tricky at
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the puzzles were really excellent. I do wish, since we're talking about puzzles, real quick, the Ashley sequence wasn't just you found the timeout from a note. I kind of wish there was actually a riddle or a puzzle involved with figuring out what was the correct time to put on the clocks to open the path
Oh.
forward.
7:12 or something like that.
I think it changes depending on difficulty. So if you
Maybe.
play on a harder
Yeah.
difficulty, you can't just sequence skip. But it's not really a puzzle so much as it is just getting to the point where you can find out the solution. It doesn't take any thought outside of getting to the note, which I thought was a little disappointing. But still, yeah, lots of cool puzzles. Definitely a highlight. Not to say that the puzzles in the original were bad. Some of them were bad, but like the ones that were good stuck out. A lot of the ones here were definitely better than expected.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Anything else you guys want to talk about?
No.
All right.
Well,
Well,
I'm ready to talk about
besides the final
question.
question, we
Yeah.
do have the final question. I just want to make sure we're clear on anything else, within the game that we want to discuss. And this game, there was a lot to talk about with this game, and again, we really liked it. If we missed something that you were really hoping we'd talk about, sorry. You could leave us a comment, let us know. One of us will respond, I guarantee it. All right, final question time. That final cutscene with Wesker obviously teased Resident Evil 5, but we haven't really gotten our formal introduction to Wesker in this remake timeline yet. Like, the game that reintroduces him as, hey, Wesker's alive, is Code Veronica. So what do you guys think is next? Do you think we are going to go full steam ahead into a Resident Evil 5 remake? Or do you think they're going to double back and actually show us why and how Wesker is still alive in a Code Veronica remake? I know, it's a tough question.
I feel like they should maybe, I don't know. I was gonna say package them both into one game, I don't know, kind of make Code Veronica kind of like a DLC, but not like a standalone thing, but not charge like a full price for it.
The thing about Code Veronica is it is a mainline series title in all but number, right? It's missing a number, but it is ostensibly a mainline Resident Evil game. And like the gameplay or the environments are there, it feels like a mainline Resident Evil game. It is a full video game. I think doing it as just a DLC would kind of be doing it dirty.
True.
All right, so I have 3 answers for this question.
Jesus Christ, I only need one, Jason.
What would make sense from a writing perspective, given that Wesker cliffhanger, so to speak, would be Code Veronica, obviously, for the reasons you said.
Yep.
What I personally want is neither. I want them to just 9.
Okay.
What's gonna happen is it's gonna go to 5.
Okay.
They're not gonna make a code. I don't think they would make a Code Veronica remake simply for financial reasons. I don't think they probably run the numbers and don't think it would do nearly as well as a 5 would for the investment of resources.
Well, sure, but at the same time, porque no los dos. Keep it within some Spanish here. I think we will get both eventually. They've said, whomever in an interview has said, there's currently no plans for a Code Veronica remake. I kind of think that's bullshit. Because again, that game is important to the canon. It is a mainline Resident Evil title in all but number. Like, if they want to keep this new continuity coherent, they kind of need to do it. And not for nothing, Code Veronica is an older game than 5 and needs a remake way more than it.
Way more than any Resident Evil game.
Yeah.
But also keep in mind with what they've changed tonally with 4. Imagine and how far we know they'll go in changing things. If they did do a 5 remake, imagine how much is going to change about that game.
don't know that a lot will change. I feel like less will change about 5 than they changed about 4. Because 5 is a game that takes itself far more seriously than 4 did inherently and in the original iterations.
Well, sure, but there's still elements that I think are absolutely going to have to change just because they're memes at this point for
Yeah,
how
well,
dumb they are.
yes. Yeah, agreed on that for sure.
And I'm not just
Um
talking about Boulder Man.
no, complete global saturation. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot about 5 that's just like, "Oh, brother." Um but anyway, and I meant to give the caveat, like obviously a 9th entry is coming. Completely remove that from your heads. I'm talking remake status. What's the next remake gonna be? Do you think Code Veronica or 5? I'm kinda hoping it's Code Veronica.
See, I know you just said remove it from your head. My hope is that 9 would go back to the I say mainline canon just because in my head I separate the winter
Yeah,
story
well,
from the main Resident Evil. My hope would be that 9 gets back to the main cast characters and can backfill a lot of what you're talking about in terms of things that need to be
well,
explained or filled in rather than do it through a remake, which
but
they
Jason.
probably will do both. But who knows?
Oh,
You
they're
know, my
100. Like I said,
I mean,
what was
like
that,
if they can
Delilah?
find a way to weave like the story of Code
yes.
Veronica
Yeah.
into something else, you know?
Yeah, but I think it's doing that game a disservice by just like completely by throwing it away as a game and just using it as like a supplemental material. I think there's a real opportunity to change the narrative of that game because I mean, I'll come out and say it. I think Code Veronica is a bad game. I think it's a really poorly designed video game, but it's integral to the Resident Evil canon.
Right.
If you're gonna keep remaking Resident Evil games and kind of updating their stories to be part of this newer continuity, you cannot leave that game out. You need to remake it and you need to reintegrate that story into this new canon because like it or not, it is important. It's Wesker, it's reintroducing Wesker. It's showing this dude's alive and now he's a bioweapon. Spoilers, sorry, for a fucking 20-year-old game, over 20-year-old game, but like I know we have a bad habit of spoiling other Resident Evil games
And
in our Resident Evil episodes, but
I guess it's also important for 5 because doesn't it also somewhat explain what's going on with Jill?
yeah, somewhat.
Yeah.
Oh, not
It's
well,
been forever.
Code Veronica doesn't, but
Well,
there's a DLC that for 5 that explains kind
oh
of what
yes, I'm
happens with
sorry.
Jill.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm getting it all
Um
confused.
yeah, and also let's not forget, guys, we have a new Resident Evil movie coming out that's like a total cast reunion coming this summer. I'm low key excited about that, even though it's probably gonna be pretty mid. Um,
All I know is I just want them to move on. They're gonna keep making remakes, but
no, yeah, like I said, the in realistically, the next Resident Evil game to come out will likely be the 9th entry, but they're gonna keep remaking them. So my question is mostly just what's the next remake do you think that they're gonna make? Is it gonna be 5 or Code Veronica?
Code
Um,
Veronica would be cooler just because it's older and, like you said, it does need a remake.
yeah.
If they want to continue the canon, more likely I would put my money on 5.
Okay.
Yeah. I also worry sometimes too, because I feel like with a lot of people who are just playing remakes and have not played originals, like because they're scared of like janky controls or whatever, I worry that they're actually gonna want to reintroduce Wesker like from the beginning.
Oh, and this comes back to our discussion, I think in the Resident Evil 1
One.
episode we did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, is Delilah introducing a third option? Do you think instead of Code Veronica or 5, do you think they will do a new RE Engine remake of 1? Next up in the remake,
Like this
uh
Wesker.
yeah, like for this Wesker to reintroduce him and kind of start showing the new audience Wesker. Do you guys think that's on the table?
How we all feel about it, because we talked about it in that episode.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much to Wesker in Resident Evil 1 that a lot of people are gonna have questions about if they are just following the remake.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree. I agree.
It's hard because you got to. I'm thinking about it from both a corporate perspective, but also just if they went to try to do one in the RE engine, they're gonna piss off the fan base
Mm-hmm.
big time. They're gonna cross some lines. But would they do it from a corporate perspective? I don't know.
Jason, I don't think they're gonna piss off anyone because Resident Evil 1 remake is it's like Resident Evil 4. You can buy it. You can freely
Yeah.
buy it. You can buy it on PlayStation 3, PS4, Xbox. It doesn't matter. You can get that game anywhere at this point. So
I know there are just a lot of Resident Evil not just Resident Evil, just survival horror fans generally that see one as like the perfect. It does.
Well, to be contrarian though, Jason, you and I are that way about Resident Evil 4, and we really liked this remake.
True.
So I think they're gonna be willing to take that risk, and I'm more open to it now. I do
be people that hate it regardless. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's people that hate Resident Evil 4 remake because it's like, okay, so then play the original. Like, you guys are able to see it as like different games, different experiences.
Yeah.
Some people are like, nope, it has to be this or nothing.
But this
you know?
is
Some
different
people aren't so
because
rational.
this is different though because with one you have to completely change what that game is, not just tonally, not just changes to the game play on micro level. Like it would just be a completely different thing.
I don't think it would be that different. Then like look at Resident Evil 2. I mean, it's Resident Evil 2 is almost the same formula, and there's not a whole lot of sections where like it takes place in Raccoon City, but it's not like you're freely roaming around Raccoon City. It's still a large building with an east wing and a west wing. You're freely exploring that. You go into other areas outside of the building that you kind of explore, but they're still fairly linear small pathways, small corridors that you're exploring, solving puzzles and progressing through. I don't think it would be fundamentally all that different.
Maybe you're right, and maybe I'm just being too cynical about it, or maybe I'm reading too much into what I see people say on the internet.
Well,
who knows?
I think that's always the case, Jason.
Yeah, I think that's always the case with pretty much everybody these days. It's the nature of the internet. But either way, I don't think going back to one is likely. But if you're talking purely from establishing Wesker as a character, then yeah, there's a lot there that a lot of people might not be exposed to. But then again, are they really thinking about it from that perspective? And then again, could 9 backfill a lot of shit?
See, I don't like the idea of these future games backfilling things. I'm not into that idea. I'm a big fan of like give me something to play to experience that story. I don't want to like just
touche. This game backfilled a lot.
In what way?
Well, just look at Leon. All the stuff regarding
Operation Javier. I mean, okay, if it's one thing to backfill an entire mainline title, it's another thing to backfill and show the backstory that took place in a fucking light gun shooter, Jason. Like, I don't care if they don't remake Dark Side Chronicles.
I'm playing devil's advocate here.
I know. But I guess just to kind of end this so we can end the show. I also don't think it's likely that one will get remade, at least not next. But I'm a little more open to the idea. After playing through Resident Evil 4 remake, I'm definitely more open to it, and I'll be interested to see what they do next with these remakes. I do think the next one should be Code Veronica, but I agree it's more likely to be 5.
Yeah. There was one thing I wanted to say about RE4 that I completely forgot that I was dying to talk about, but we don't have to linger.
That's
but it's
fine.
like It was a criticism I had of Resident Evil 8, and it's something that they did in the original as well, but I understood it for the original. For this one, I felt like they could have played around a little bit more, but it's the connectivity of the world. Too often this game blocks you off from backtracking. Not just within not just I passed the village, I went to the castle, I can't go back to the village. It's also like once you get to the part where it starts storming in the village, you can't go to certain areas of the village to clean up what you missed off. And they're arbitrary cutoff points. It's not just it makes sense story-wise, oh, this bridge broke. It's no, they just put a tree there, or they just created a gap on the bridge for no reason. So that I just wish that there was a little bit more exploration there. I would have loved, ideally, I can go from the island to the castle to and wherever. And I felt like when they opened up the lake, it was a beautiful moment of just this exploration moment. But I feel like the game tricked me into thinking I could freely explore and then cut me off too often. So I just kind of wish I had more freedom to backtrack.
Yeah, we didn't talk about the lake, and that was a cool chunky section of supplemental exploration. It was pretty cool how they kind of gave us that just a kind of breather period to explore at our own pace and do additional things. I do I totally get where you're coming from. I do think this game feels a little more open than the original does. It just feels less segmented into chapters, even though it still uses a chapter structure. But it still feels more like I could go to a lot of areas, and there's actually things to do in those areas in later chapters than I could in the original iteration. But
Like a survival horror game, yeah.
yeah. But I definitely did get frustrated by a few points of no return. During the showdown in the house with Luis, uh,
Oh, yeah.
there was a treasure that dropped from the big boar guy, and I
And
didn't
it
grab it in
shows
time.
it shows it on the map for the rest of the yeah,
That
exactly.
was torturous.
Yeah. Which, good on them for showing my bolt for the bolt cutter on the map, but it
Yeah.
definitely hurt seeing something on the map that I just couldn't go to.
Yeah, I gotta agree on that one. That one was it's always just a mentally frustrating. Also, I get why they couldn't do this with this game because enemies drop things, and if an enemy drops something and you don't pick it up, that area is just perpetually red, but the area staying red on your map and not changing when you found everything at first was just it was painful.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh man, did I get everything in this area? Do I need to run around a couple more times to look for it? Eventually, I gave up on that and just kind of accepted it as the way it is, Resident Evil 4. But it was still if they could have picked any color other than red for the map, I would have appreciated that at the very
Yeah.
least. Because it mentally it just made me think this area is incomplete. This area is incomplete. What do I do?
Marking his map OCD, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have
Hey,
the same problem.
I was gonna say Delilah has the same problem as me. Don't
I,
pin this all on me, man.
I literally, we're about to end the episode, and I was like, no, I have to talk about this. If I don't talk about this, I'm forever gonna be stuck with this hatred.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. All right. We gotta wrap up. Jason, Kwasnicki rating. What you got?
Oof. I'm hovering between 9.3 and 9.4. On a scale of 1 to 10, I use the entire scale, folks.
0.4, man.
0.4, yeah. 9.4.
Ah, there we go. 9.4 what though?
9.4 herbs.
No, come on. You've used
Fine.
herbs before. Come
9.
on.
All right, fine. 9.4 spinels we'll use.
All right, there we go. I like it. All right, Delilah, what you working on? Anything you want to plug?
Bro, I fucking quit doing everything because of my job.
I know that feeling. Trust me.
Yeah. I intermittently post stuff on YouTube, and I randomly stream. I most likely you can catch me streaming at Twitch when a new game comes out, like a new big game, like the next game we're doing. But other than that, I just do what I want when I want it. So I'm sorry.
All right, no, that's fine. That's cool.
Life is hard.
Yeah. I got nothing to plug right now. Jason, you got nothing to plug, right?
I got nothing to plug.
All right.
I'm
Well,
incognito.
I'm
Yeah.
about to be.
Not that I really am on there much anymore, but you can find me on Twitter at Nibelheimian. You can follow Delilah on Twitter at Assassina_San. You can follow Jason on Twitter at SolidQuaz, but don't follow him. If I'm not really using Twitter much anymore, Jason's definitely not. So uh,
Uh,
you can just forget about that. And follow Delilah on YouTube at Assassina-san, Twitch Assassina_san or -san. You know, just search Assassina
something.
dash or _san. You'll find her.
Yeah.
If you liked this episode, thank you so much for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, again, thank you. Please give us a like. Let us know in the comments, you know, what your thoughts on this game were. If you really liked it, if you really hated it, tell us why. And you know, make sure to subscribe to the channel and share the show with your family, your friends, your pets, anyone that you think would enjoy listening to Reap the Spoils. You can also, if you listen to us on Apple Podcast, thank you so much. Please rate and review the show, 5 stars preferred. Tell us what you like, tell us what you didn't like. It really, really helps the show grow when you give us that feedback. It's really, really helpful. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside, and you know, sharing the show helps us grow, helps us get more listeners. Listening to my sultry voice talk way too much, like I did in this episode. And yeah, that's kind of that. Delilah, what is our next game?
Star Wars Jedi Survivor.
Oh, get ready, folks. If you think I got hot takes about Resident Evil, get
Oh,
ready for
God.
Star Wars dumps of lore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. It was supposed to come out what, like 6 weeks ago or so, and got delayed, and it kind of worked out in the end for us, scheduling wise.
Probably worked out
Yeah.
for them as well.
Yeah, probably
Yeah,
worked out
like
for everyone involved.
yeah.
But yeah, this game's coming out pretty soon, and I think we're all looking forward to it. So, and you know, as a primer for that pending game and that subsequent episode on that game, go and listen to our Jedi Fallen Order episode that we released several years ago.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think we all liked it.
if we all did like it. We had some criticisms of certain things.
The map.
Well, you didn't like the map. I didn't like the ponchos, but
Oh yeah, we talked about the ponchos for a while.
yeah, that game was like we spent like half an hour talking about the story and then an hour and a half talking about the ponchos. But yeah, go listen to that episode in preparation for in preparation for that episode, that game, and yeah, time to go to bingo. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Thanks for stopping by.
Goodbye, stranger.